Everybody, it is after 9 o'clock. We'll call the meeting to order. Becky, would you call the roll?
It'll be on the screen otherwise.
Jim Sheeline, Arlen McLean, Tom Kitson,
Present.
Larry Mamini, Doug Farster,
Present.
Rick Humphrey,
Here.
Tim Bivens.
All right, we've got, it's been so long since we've gotten together. We do have the minutes from last night's budget meeting. If everybody has had a chance to take a look at them.
I have it.
And they are in the board book. Under point 4, approval of the minutes from previous budget meeting. And you'll see in action that we made the motion to fund the organizations that submitted the request at the level of last year. Oh, sorry. And in the total amount of $101,000. Everything looked good to everybody. Tom says yes. Doug says yes. Tim. Okay, no additions or corrections. Hearing none, I entertain a motion to approve minutes from last night, moved by Kitson, seconded by Forrester. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carried. Thank you very much. Right, so we'll go right into, because we are going to be crunched for time. We've got a heavy agenda. So we're going to go straight to new business. Point 6A, committee and court system joint budget hearing. So Jackie, I guess we'll start with you and you can just give an overview. And then I think probably what we'll do is we'll go through everybody's, budget the rest of the way, but if you want to lead it off, that'd be great. Yeah, right.
I'm sure most of you have heard by now that Illinois had passed what's called the Safety Act. Included in the Safety Act is
Jackie, could you make sure that you're in the mic? Yeah. You gotta get,
You want me to
you
eat
gotta
this?
get personal with it. Sorry.
Really, really poor equipment. We're trying to fix that, but
Yeah, we are getting new microphones sometime this century, so.
Okay, so included in the Safety Act is the Pretrial Fairness Act, which is what affects the court system most directly. There are parts of the Safety Act that also affect law enforcement and the state's attorney's office with a lot of new requirements, a lot of changes, and of course, no extra money for that. So the way it affects the court system, the Pretrial Fairness Act is where we've moved to the no bond, no cash bond system. It's not really correct to say no bond. Basically, when someone's arrested now, there are defined detainable offenses. And if the state's attorney's office determines they would like to detain that individual, we have to have a hearing to detain that individual. There are a lot of crimes out there now that are no longer detainable, but we would have pretrial conditions that could be imposed. I think you will see, because one of the large area of crimes that's not included in the detainable offenses are drug offenses. There's not one drug offense that's included as a detainable offense. So you can have your drug trafficker get caught in Lee County, and we're not allowed to detain that individual. We can impose conditions. So I believe what you'll see is the state's attorney's office requesting in some of these cases, the use of electronic monitoring or drug testing. As we increase drug testing, that affects our probation department, who does all of our drug testing. It's going to require more court time for these hearings. There is a provision in the law that the court shall appoint the public defender upon arrest, basically. It's prior to them ever appearing in court. So prior to their initial appearance, normally we would have initial appearance, they would be arraigned, and I would ask them, tell them they have the right to have an attorney. Are you able to hire an attorney? At that point, they would request a public defender or tell me they're going to hire their own attorney. Right now, you are preemptively appointing the public defender before they even appear. So it's going to require more time from our public defenders despite financial status at least at that initial hearing. The intent of the law is that no court system set a bond on a defendant or bond conditions without that defendant having an attorney present and being physically present. That's another aspect of this law. Is now I know our jail is south of town, physically present. And although we've had discussions on waivers, if the defendant's willing to waive their right to be physically present, we can still appear by video. But if you have the defendant demanding to be present in the courtroom, then we're going to transport back and forth for these hearings. Rick, you had a question?
It just seems odd. How does that affect, like a person say they are arrested and their personal attorney is available and is assigned a public defender? Does that open up the door for a mistrial or anything to that degree if something goes away?
The person always has the right to hire a private attorney at a later date. So I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, they can always claim ineffective representation of counsel, but ineffective representation of counsel at a bond hearing, the only result would be, okay, I let you out of jail. So it wouldn't affect the underlying case. Right. Another provision of the law is if there's a court date for their criminal case and they don't show up, normally we issue a warrant and go pick them up and bring them to court. Now we're not allowed to issue that warrant. We have to send them another invite in the form of a rule to show cause. That rule to show cause has to be served on them. So the state's attorney's office either has to choose to serve them by certified mail, or we have to have the sheriff's process server going and serving them with the next court date, which means we're going to have to create more court times for people that just couldn't come to court. So then we can't even docket that they failed to appear. I guess we just docket they're not there. And then if they don't show up after being served the rule to show cause, then we can docket that they were a failure to appear, and then we can issue a warrant. But if they show up, then we go through another process of determining why they weren't there and continuing with the case. All of this just creates more work for everyone. Your probation department, your state's attorney's office, your public defender's office, the clerk's office. And I'm not even mentioning weekend court yet. That's the next thing. The law anticipates that we would hold weekend court because it says to bring them before the court without unnecessary delay at the next available court hearing. Which if we were to hold weekend court for detention hearings, or even if we're not going to detain them, but we want to set bond conditions, that would be a court hearing. Then they have to have the public defender present. We would have to have a clerk present. We would have to have the courthouse open. We would have to have security, state's attorney, court reporter. Although I might be able to have a court reporter zoom in for that.
What's the requirement time-wise and how much leniency do you have?
There's 24 hours if it's a class 4 or lower. I mean, 24 hours if it's a class 3 or higher, 48 hours. Or am I doing that backwards, Charlie? The 24 hours on the higher offenses?
No, it's the 48 hours in the higher offense.
Okay, so it's 48 hours. The other part of that is the state's attorney's office is required to give all discovery within that 48 hours. As you can imagine, if you have law enforcement background, the state's attorney's office doesn't have all the discovery within 48 hours, but they have to tender whatever they have. So there's a lot of legwork for the state's attorney just in that short period of time also to give that to the public defender. So it is 24 and 48 hours. So let's say we have a lot of Monday holidays. Someone gets picked up Friday night. That would mean Sunday court if they are a class 3 felony or higher. There's a lot of discussions. I'm the chief judge now of our circuit, so we've been discussing several aspects of this law every meeting. I'm on a subcommittee for the Pretrial Fairness Act. This folder is all my pretrial stuff right now. And that's just scratching the surface of what we have to do. So there's a discussion about what's going to, can we avoid weekend court? Are we going to be required to have weekend court? I think at this time, we have to assume we're going to have weekend court because that's the intent of the law, even though there's no legislative history there. And that was the intent of the drafters of the law. The other aspect of this that affects primarily the state's attorney and the public defender more so than the court itself is the body cam section of the law, the Safety Act. Now with the requirement of body cams, that means all of that body cam footage is disclosable to FOIA requests as well as to the attorneys. So there's going to have to be someone reviewing all of that body cam footage for the state's attorney's office. Just to give you an example, and we're not as big as them, thank goodness, but Kane County, I know presenting the impact of this law on their court system, presented to their county board the request for 61 new attorneys. Just in large part to hash out a lot of this body cam footage sections and the weekend court and all these other requirements. And then we're not that large, but it will impact all of our offices. It will take chunks of court time. I know we have part-time public defenders, but Charlie and Bob and I have met a few times discussing the impacts and how we're going to have to hold hearings. And we're really going to have to carve out additional days every week for court time that we don't do now. What we used to be able to handle just at the 1 o'clock bond call every day is not going to be enough. And we're going to have rule to show cause hearing days for those people that don't come to court that we have to invite again to court. It's just going to require a lot more time.
Jackie, I've got a curiosity question. With the type of impact, I mean, we're talking a large impact on a small county like us. You've mentioned, and I've heard that before, 61 additional state's attorneys, in a county the size of Kane. I can't imagine we're looking at Sangamon, Peoria, Champaign, McLean, all of these downstates. Has there been a significant pushback in regards to the court system? Officers like the chief judges of the different circuits communicating this to the General Assembly that what you've done here is just a monstrosity and is really going to disrupt the what we do here in regards to criminal justice.
Prior to the passage of this bill, there was a task force in place that was created by the Supreme Court, and it had been operating for 2 to 3 years. And it was a pretrial task force, and they were investigating what the state of Illinois needed to do to address pretrial issues. They prepared I forget the length of the report. It was somewhere between 60 and 80-page report with several recommendations. That report had just been published prior to this law that, by the way, this law passed in the middle of the night, 700 pages. And they did not consult that task force, and they did not I don't know if they even read the task force report. That task force has remained in place, and we now have several. As I mentioned, I'm on one of the subcommittees. We have several subcommittees, and they have been communicating with the drafters of the legislation as well as other legislators. There's a lot of inconsistencies in the law as well, things that need to be cleaned up. And what I'm being told is just don't hold your breath that anything's going to change. Just plan on this being implemented January 1st. Be prepared. And the part about the no bond, the other impact it has on the county is the clerk's office was able to retain 10% of any bond. And now you won't have any. I mean, it takes all of the money out of the system. The individual is either held in jail or they're released, and there's no cash. And I know Amy and Shannon mentioned before at the meeting we had at the retreat, they've ran the numbers. Because also when they posted bond, the bond would always apply to their fines, fees and costs first before, if there was any balance being refunded to them. Now you're not going to have that ability. So those upfront payments on fines, fees and costs, they won't be there. I guess the individual will be back on a payment plan, $50 per month. I'm not sure. We'll have to see their finances, but I know when Shannon ran numbers, it was around 400,000 a year that we wouldn't be taking in anymore. Now, that's not the clerk's portion of it, but out of that 400,000 a year, most of that went to pay the fines, fees and costs incurred. So it really is a missing number.
You mentioned the body cam. Who's the keeper of the video?
Charlie, that would be your office, right?
I couldn't hear him.
Who's keeping the body cam footage, the keeper of the video?
So the body cam footage, the way that we have it set up right now, or the way we're gonna have it set up when sheriff's office receives the body cams, is that the video itself would be maintained on servers that we would have access to, but we would not be the ones that would specifically have those servers in our possession.
That was my next question as far as cost, because video that's a lot of storage,
Oh, yeah.
store video. What, do we have a cost estimate for just the video storage?
That's probably a question for sheriff because he's working
Okay.
on that. I know DPD just got their body cams. And I think they're working on their policies, procedures and the servers themselves. So I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you.
I believe I've touched on all the highlights. Bob, Charlie, you think I missed anything?
No, I was just sitting back here thinking to myself, she's hitting all the highlights I was gonna hit. So taking the words out of my mouth.
And I've had discussions with Bob and Charlie both. If this act goes into play January 1, like we all anticipate it's going to, Bob especially, I know he's going to need another staff person to process all of the discovery, just on the body cam footage alone. Not to mention all the other issues that come with the extra hearings and discovery and then Charlie, his office is going to have to process everything. It will require more bodies. It will require more employees.
So as she's talking about the processing portion of that, so anytime there's gonna be officers responding to a scene, let's just assume that at least one is gonna be there, but more likely there's gonna be probably 3 or more. And they're all gonna have their body cam activated, responding to that scene. They're all gonna have different things that they're doing on scene. If it's just a DUI, one could be in the vehicle running them on leads or running them through the Secretary of State to see if they're revoked, whatever it may be. The other one's responding back to them to have them go through field sobriety tests. Another one's just there for officer safety. So those are the 3 different cameras that we're going to have to go through, make sure that nothing is going on through radio traffic going on that's on the side. If there's a juvenile related case that comes over radio traffic, we have to redact that because that can't be disclosed. So there's a lot of little things that we have to look for every time we're looking at these body cam videos.
Wow. Well,
And
again,
Correct.
Assume that. So Judge, if, I use myself as an example. If I go out and get stupid on Friday night, you're gonna have a weekend court, you're gonna release.
It depends on
Well,
how stupid you get.
let's assume that's something. But I mean, aren't we gonna, isn't the potential of having repeat people because we didn't really
Yes.
serve, I mean, slap on the hand, so why wouldn't I go do it again, kind of thing?
Yes.
Is there anything in that law that repeat to a point that you say,
I use the example when we, Judge Lee and I presented at Rotary Club, and I use the example of Ace Hardware. So a guy walks into Ace Hardware and he walks out with a saw. Dixon Police Department picked him up. They have to release, it's not a detainable offense. So we release him. He can go right back out to Ace Hardware, walk out with a weed eater, and we just arrest him again and we let him go again.
thank you.
Right.
what we have to be prepared for is if New York is our model.
Yeah.
There's a CNN article right here that says there's a 60% increase in major crimes that's happened there. Given areas, it's running 35, 47, 50% increase, so.
The retail theft issue is a real issue.
I mean, this is-
Because, you know, you've seen it in San Francisco, you've seen it in New York. You see it in Chicago even now, where they just go in and walk out with whatever they want. It's a real issue.
To kind of piggyback off what she's saying too, so it's very few and far between that we would charge on a burglary for retail theft. Case law plays a big part of that, but also unless we can show a common scheme where they're going from business to business, doing certain things within a neighborhood and actually taking items out of those stores, we don't normally charge burglary. But even if we were, under the new law, we still couldn't hold them because it's not a non-probationable forcible felony.
Right, so the only detainable offenses are the non-probationable forcible felony, your domestic batteries. I don't want to bore you to death with all the little intricacies of the law, but there's silly things like, Tom, if I came over and grabbed your shirt, they could charge me with battery and I could be detained, but I could traffic as much coke through the county as I want and not be detained. So there are issues there. There's always discussion of changing, but we have to deal with what we have right now.
As taxpayers, it's bad. As we sit here, it's a financial nightmare. We get big rounds.
Well,
You know,
guess whose name's going to be on the cover of the newspaper when something bad happens on a person that gets released.
yeah.
I'm not real fond of that idea either. Now, you know, there's some misleading information out there that we're going to have murderers on the street, that those are detainable people. Lee County's not going to put a murderer back on the street. They will be detained. It will, however, if you detain someone, and this part I didn't mention, it speeds up the speedy trial clock. So if you ordered that they be detained, the state has to try them within 90 days. That's a lot of work, let's say on a murder case or some other very serious offenses on a serious sex offense. The individual in custody that's being detained can demand their trial within 90 days. Now, what happens if we don't try them in 90 days? It doesn't make the case go away. It means I have to release them. I do not anticipate releasing anyone back in the community in those circumstances without a trial.
Well, Jackie, thank you for that overview. I think what we're seeing, is a pendulum that has swung so far one way. Eventually, it's got to, it has to come back at some point. But at what cost, and how long is it going to take for that pendulum to come back to where you guys can? Because I see this as obstruction to you guys being able to do your job. Besides the cost that we're incurring, as a taxing body. But our issue is we've got elected officials that are denying that these problems are even going on. I've sat and watched, we have Chesa Boyden that gets recalled. We've got Gascon in California that is on the bubble. We've got Jamie Foxx in Chicago. That all these state's attorneys that have helped promulgate a lot of these things that we're seeing happen now in our own state, is in trouble. And, we can't help but believe the same thing, that same pattern is going to continue here in the state of Illinois. So real quick, Tom.
We're talking, you've mentioned state's attorneys, clerks, and so forth. Do we have enough judges to handle this?
I do believe so at this time. Now, in our circuit, because of the 2020 census, our circuit lost 3,000 people. Under the Associate Judge Act, that means we lose an associate judge in our circuit. So to simplify it, there's 8 associate circuit judges. 2 of those are what are called permissive positions. The other 6 are under they're population based. So Lee County has one of the permissive positions and Ogle County has one of the permissive positions. If those individuals retire, I can fill that position. If any of the other 6 retire, we'll lose the first one. So we will be short a judge in the circuit, which means I'll have to shuffle sending people will travel more. There are chief judges working on that with their legislators to try to get the Associate Judge Act changed. There's this crazy little donut hole in the act, and McHenry County actually gained population, but they're going to lose a judge. The Fifth Circuit is losing 3. So they're working on that, but once again, there are some people that just look at cost savings and not the ability to do the job.
As this date gets closer and people start putting their budgets together for the coming year and they start realizing the added cost, I mean, have you heard of any attempts to at least revise this law that was implemented or amended in any such way that maybe the combination of what they've got and what they end up, or is it just in be all or nothing, or?
There are a lot of discussions about wanting to amend it. And as I mentioned earlier, that pretrial task force has addressed and spoken to the drafters directly about some of the problems within it. The last I heard was that their drafters are not interested in opening it back up because they don't want to lose other components of the law.
There's just a lot of, especially in down counties in southern Illinois, that just don't have the funds available to do this type of thing. So at some point in time, it's either going to be a court case where they didn't, get everything processed in time and the constitutionality of it all, or something that's going to have to break. I mean, they can't expect this to be such a burden on the rest of the state. I just, I don't know.
There's a county in southern Illinois in the Second Circuit that only has criminal court on Thursdays.
Yeah.
I mean, they're scrambling to, they have one public defender that goes to several counties. How
Right.
do they get that public defender into all the different court systems for bond hearings? Yes, there's a lot of issues.
I mean, I just wonder what happens if we don't do it.
Well, the problem is this bill was promulgated by activists, and activists do not care about unintended consequences. They don't think about unintended consequences. They don't care about us. And the thing of it is we had, there has to be some accountability, and people have to understand that elections have consequences. We hear that constantly, but here is a prime case where the election and the continual control, and I would say radicalization of one side has created this monster that we're having to deal with.
And just, I know, Rick, you just said, well, what if we don't do it? Just so you know, I mean, the judges and the
Well,
attorneys in the room, we all have ethical obligations.
Sure,
We
I get it.
can't choose to ignore law, so we will follow the law. But I get it. There's a lot of
Well, I mean,
problems. and
I'm talking more financials, and just say we're just flat busted, we don't have any funds, and then what happens? I mean, it seems, I don't know, counterproductive.
Another unfunded mandate.
The issue with unfunded mandates has always been is that you're required to perform under the law regardless of the financial consequences. So if you don't have the money, you find it. And that means borrowing. And that's the way it's always been.
That's a
So-
really nice segue into, let's talk specifics about how this is going to impact the budget. And Judge Ackert, do you have anything specific in this year's budget that you plugged in as a result of this?
I don't recall in my budget that I plugged anything in specifically. I think because I came to the finance committee before about increasing my conflict attorneys, right, numbers, that would have been in anticipation of this as well. So
Yes.
I've already kind of addressed that. I don't think any other line item in my budget. would
And
be
that
increased.
was actually plugged in because as you said, you came in earlier.
Yes.
And for the committee's sake, budget requests impacts to this topic have been all plugged in. So right now, with the deficit you're looking at, we've already accounted for those things. But I thought it would be a good opportunity for these various departments to actually be specific about which line items are impacted and by how much. So I thought maybe that's a good segue into allowing some of these other departments to kind of address specifically what's going on in their budget.
Yes. Thank you.
Who would like to start?
No, Charlie is standing up and coming
I'll
to
come
the
up.
seat. Very good.
So just as a reminder, guys, finance committee members, you've got this in on board in that detailed report under the state's attorney's budget. I will try to find it here and share the screen.
It's on page 5 to 6. He's split.
And I think I've done a pretty good job of breaking it down too, so I can kind of talk through it while she's pulling it up. But the biggest changes, my budget, there's going to be some decreased amounts, but there are going to be increases. The decreased amounts are going to be the part-time line item that has transitioned over as the full-time category because we had an ASA that was being taken out of the part-time line item. So that would go from 31,000 down to 15,000. Postage would be decreased by $500, maintenance by $1,000, and training and conferences by another $1,000. As for increases, our prisoner transport would be increased from 3,000 to 5,000. And that's based on what we've seen over the last year. We've had people that we've had to go pick up from like New Jersey, Texas, wherever it may be. Most of the time we get reimbursed for those costs, but to pay for it up front, we need to have that flexibility. There's an increase with our Westlaw subscription. It goes up 3%. The increase in the software is from 24,000 to 30,000. I'm sorry. There is the search warrant software that we've purchased this mid-year that we're using for remote search warrants to be done either after hours or on the weekends, that kind of thing. And that one is going to be $2,500 a year. And that's used by Dixon Police Department, Lee County Sheriff's Office, the judges, my office, obviously. Then the big one that you're going to see in the budget is going to be the personnel expense. That one's going to be for a new ASA and a new staff person. And again, I think Judge Eggert did a pretty good job outlining why there's going to be a need for this. But even with the attorneys that we have right now and the increases that I'm talking about, to keep good people around, as you're already aware, is really hard to do, especially because we've got people like Kane County, Winnebago County, suburbs that are hiring attorneys right now, and they're able to pay way more than we're able to pay. We've been looking for an ASA for the better part of 2 months at this point, just getting feelers out there. And I've received one resume, and that's from a guy in New York that doesn't qualify for the job. But we've had that out on Indeed, LinkedIn. We use the services that the county's prepared for us as well. We go through the law schools that are in the area, NIU, and still there's just not a lot of interest in coming out to our neck of the woods. So what you'll see is that increase based on a new ASA position, as well as a new staff person to help out with body cams and the preparing of documents for detention hearings, discovery. As Judge Eckert again stated, that there's going to be a huge influx of timelines that we're going to have, not to mention the judicial guidelines that the judges are going to be working off of for closing out cases as well. So I could ask for car allowances for the ASAs that I have now, because I've got 2 that are coming from DeKalb. I've got 2 that are coming from Sterling. I could ask for cost of living increases just based off of those. But what I've tried to do is just budgetary personnel salary, increase that enough to help them out, but also to look for that ASA and the new staff member.
Charlotte.
Yes,
So that's an additional 2 in headcount.
correct. So there would be the staff member, which does like the secretarial duties, does the preparation of court documents, filings, that kind of stuff. And then it would also be the prosecutor.
So, Paul, this is the second part of the question. You know, I mean, in our health insurance line here and the IMRF and FICA, slight increase, is that enough to warrant 2 additional headcount?
Yeah, the health insurance is really a formula based on the people that are already there and what they're taking. So as you add probably a head count, they may not take the health insurance. So that's kind of I'm going to say at best a forecast. But the FICA and the IMRF is based on that $602,000 value that he's got there.
So in other words, Rick, we could plug in something for health insurance, but it's a guess because we don't know if they'll take it. Will it be single coverage? Will it be family coverage? So typically we just do it based on what we know, not what we speculate.
But it is, yeah,
I
I
would
mean,
assume,
it is forecasting that they would use something. I mean, I just don't know that we've got like a full family value in that, but you might have employee plus spouse or
And
something.
I guess I can clarify that a little bit. So the position I'm going to be looking for a new prosecutor, we're looking for more of an entry level prosecutor to handle traffic and misdemeanor stuff to relieve the prosecutors that are already here in the office to do the new additional requirements. So it could be that there's less than I would have in the line item for the salaries as well, just because if you can get an entry level person, I'd like to say I can get them for 45 or 50, but I know by Carroll County and Joe Davies County, when they were looking for an entry level attorney, they actually had to hike theirs up to 65,000 a year.
and it, I mean, that is what it is. You have to hire whatever you can find. But my concern is that more than likely, if they're a professional, they're coming here, they're gonna want the insurance. So we should probably at least figure on single coverage. I know family's gonna be dictated on whether they're married and have kids or not, but I'd rather see us be high on that line item than coming short. So I don't know. That's why I was asking how many people we had calculated in that line to make sure that we've got room for 2 additional.
So Rick, I'll just make a note on that and just make sure and circle back with Paula to see how exactly she calculated that. And if we need to make an adjustment, we can do that. I'll just make a note.
Yeah, but I do know that we did calculate in an increase with the additional headcount.
Yeah, I mean, it's gone from 70 to 78, 79,000 range. So an increase was factored in.
Not the only one person.
So Charlie, this increase in that line item, you feel that this is adequate? I mean, you've started off and not getting a very good response. You're gonna have to crank that up to track some interest.
Correct.
Do you think you have enough there as the process goes forward?
The way I've budgeted it right now is for an ASA, I could go up to 60,000. That's with all of the other increases with the other ASAs that I have right now. Like I said, Carroll County was without an assistant state's attorney for the better part of 9 months. And it took them getting up to $65,000 before they were even able to get somebody that was fresh out of law school. So I don't know that it'll be enough, but.
Well, the answer
trying
is
to be
no.
Conservative, correct, yeah. The staff member that I'm looking for, I'm trying to stay in the ballpark around 37,000, which is consistent with the ones that we have right now.
So it's really the ASA that's the issue.
I think so. When we had to replace a staff member who went to a different office, we had a ton of resumes come through. Now, granted, there's probably only 10% of them that would actually be qualifying for the position, but at least there was a lot more interest to wade through.
Any other questions for Charlie? Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Well, and this budget will cover cost of work.
Correct. So the personnel cost that we have is a salary cost. So the ASAs don't make hourly, so it won't matter on the weekend. It's just whenever you have to work, when you have an on-call schedule, you're going to have to work. For example, I was in this weekend for the better part of 12 hours over Saturday and Sunday, but I'm salary.
Well, I just want to make sure we gonna cover it. Hit stagger. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thanks, Charlie. Appreciate it. All right, who wants to go next?
Bob, I think everybody's
Stacy
looking
and
at you.
Bob are going back and forth. Bob, come on up. You stood up, so there you go. Yeah, he's. All right, now I gotta find what page you're on. How you doing?
He should be immediately after the state's attorney.
Is he?
Down a little
Okay.
further, you'll see it.
That was 5, 6. Okay. There we go. All right, everybody. Okay. Everybody got Bob up. All right, Bob, go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Jim. First, I'll say I agree with you. I mean, the way this has all happened, it's blindsided us by people who don't really care about us. The 700-page bill that they passed through in the dark of night, I want to start with by saying I'm no fan of it. I don't want to be dealing with this here. We've got an excellent system in place already. It's Cook County politics that shouldn't be applicable to us. And so I regret also having to go through these numbers that we have to do to meet the demands of, what do you know, another unfunded mandate from the government. So I just wanted to take you through a little historical picture of the budget for those of you who may not have been here for the last 4 years or more even. Mary Worley left us from the employment perspective about 8 years ago, and her position was succeeded by Nikki Perez Massini, and we did not replace Nikki's position. That to date has saved us about $400,000 in salary that would have been spent had Mary not retired, and things just remained the same. If you look back just to FY 21, you'll see that the budget request I have this year is almost equal to that, but I wanted to answer questions ahead of time and let you know that there's legal services pulled out of there because Tom Murray's now under Judge Ackert's budget. So just kind of wanted to help you understand through illustration here where the numbers are coming from, because it looks like I'm asking for hardly anything when you compare it to FY 21, but in fact, I'm requesting a $65,000 increase based upon the numbers that you've heard already from what it's taking to replace prosecutors and public defenders. At my last check, when we met with the executive committee, Whiteside County had 2 vacancies for public defenders that couldn't fill. Those were at 65,000 thereabouts. The average median salary of public defenders in the state of Illinois is 62,000. And Ogle County is just now seeing a public defender leave as well that they'll have to replace. Judge Ackert's right. I'm going to need somebody. However, as it stands, I'm going to have a hard time finding somebody. That being said, I'm part-time. That doesn't mean we don't work a lot of hours, but that's how I'm scheduled anyway. That allows me to work outside of the office, weekends, all that I do today. So my proposal includes what it would cost without benefits of healthcare, because they're already there, to apply it toward my first assistant, my only assistant, and myself in fulfilling the hours that we could add to it, and thereby subtracting what we're doing, in the private sector, of course, because we'll be required to be here. What we think at least, 3 extra dates, perhaps a week. Those detention hearings, once they're afforded to the state, they have to be revisited. You have to have them again, and then you've got the rules to show cause. Those dates will be a standing date. The detention hearings that just pop up will be ad hoc. We'll get them, get a phone call or an email. We're having a hearing. Let's go. So you got to be at the ready. You're kind of on call, like any other emergency service. So I've allocated that 65,000, and you'll see in my footnote. If maybe you don't get my footnotes, do you? I'm not sure. So I wrote the salary officer and full-time salary request reflects 65,000 to meet the pretrial detention laws. It also eliminates the stipend. So if you review there, you'll see there's a stipend for 7,800. That's eliminated because that stipend was to meet the needs of the first change in the bond laws. And so with getting rid of the 7,800 and then increasing the public defender reimbursement itself, because I put 35,000 in department head, I put 25,000 or 35,000 then in the full-time, 30. That then makes a net increase request anyway, when you count the reimbursement, of $32,200 from that 65,000, because you're getting money back from the state for what you're paying me, which you wouldn't get if you hired somebody new to take on the job at 65,000. And I really don't think I'll find anybody. I don't know if we're dinosaurs, we're dying out, and it's going to take some new blood to come to this community. And nobody has shown interest, like Charlie said, and he's going to have a hard time, replacing it on his end, which I think his end's probably more important than mine. I'm kind of the bottom of the food chain here. I understand that. but I'm a necessity. And so I'll open that up then for questions if you have any. Jackie went through the act very well, what we're going to be required to do. Let me add one thing, if you don't mind. When we started our alternative court, the Veterans Treatment Court, which I'm the public defender for that court, we started it with a grant, and that grant lasted 3 years. We got an extension because of the pandemic. So I've been getting paid about $15,000 a year out of that. And I split that with Doug, who runs our drug court, even though that's payable to me. I'm not requesting any money for that, but we do lose that grant money this year. And that's additional work that we never did over the last 20 years until, well, 15 years ago when they started the drug court, and then the last 6-7 years when they started Veterans Treatment Court. So there's nothing requested there. I wanted to put it out there just so I know that I've mentioned it, because it's been a contractual service, and that it was funded by a grant, which does not appear in the request.
So my first question to you, Bob, you feel very confident or as confident as you can in the increase in the budget line items for both salaried officer and full-time?
Well, I was worried when we didn't replace Nikki, but I felt positively, hope. So that's my level of confidence. We'll address it. We're not going to shirk any of the duties. Like you agreed, we have to answer the law that's required of us. So we'll be there, and we'll be comfortable with how we're being, treated in terms of time. I think so. I mean, I did it based upon the best calculation I could do it.
Okay.
And that's adding one more person.
And I just want to say, I appreciate, you guys' areas being this upheaval, and there's so many unknowns. And you guys have come in with what I think is very, reasonable numbers for having so many unknowns. So I guess, I'm asking, and I think the committee's been asking questions of, we appreciate you guys being honest as possible with us. So
Yeah. Let me add to that if you don't mind. And then Rick, since you're thinking like a lawyer today anyhow,
No,
the evolution of this job, I think, if you stick here around here long enough and watch me get succeeded, is this job's going to become full-time public defender. And that's a good thing for the county, because you'll actually spend a $20,000 net less by not replacing Tom Murray's contractual services, because your full-time public defender will take those over. I've never wanted to push out a person who's been capably fulfilling this role for 15 years. Okay, we're gonna make me full-time, you just lost your job that you've had for so long. But that's the evolution of the job, of the office. And you're gonna be able to then spend less money because of the statewide reimbursement. By spending more, you're getting more back. And that'll eliminate the 50 or 35,000 that Tom Murray's making. And in addition, it'll reimburse 66 2/3 of that money as well.
Rick, go ahead.
okay, I'm gonna ask you to get your crystal ball out here. Bob.
Okay.
So, well, I fully support and appreciate your effort to, keep the head count the same and compensate you for additional work, which I think is deserved. Let's say that the state comes to their senses in a year or 2 years down the road and we go back to the way things are. I mean, is this going to be a problem if we take away basically the salary increase, or is it going to be pushed back at that point in time? And you might not be here, I don't know, but so I'm just trying to look down the road to see what happens if in fact that does happen, which maybe it does, maybe it doesn't.
Okay, well, I hope it does happen. And that would mean less money for me, and that's fine, because I don't want this work, but I'm gonna do this work.
Sure. No, I-
So crystal ball wise, it would not impact the Lee County Public Defender's Office, because I'll leave within the next 4 years. That's my anticipation. And so if that happened, that's fine. I will come back though and seek whatever bond hearing money I gave up, and then whatever specialty court time we might want to be reimbursed for, or paid for rather. And it wouldn't be nearly this much. It'd be similar to our own.
So then the second part of the question is, again, and this is probably a question for Paul, but I just want to make sure we've got enough money in the budget for FICA, IMRF, for the increase in pay, because if I'm not mistaken, that's all based on what the compensation package is.
Right.
So it goes up along with compensation. So Paul, I guess I turn that back to you. Are these numbers secure
Yeah.
based on what the ask is.
Yes, and IMRF, you'll notice on most departments, it's actually gonna go down because we've got for 23, the match, if you will, value has been decreased tremendously based on the funding value of that whole program and the ending market value as of the end of 21.
Yeah, so just as a reminder to the committee, that's a rolling average. So what gets given one year gets taken away, and depending on what the market action is, and we already know what this year's done. But the actuaries are gonna come back and they're gonna
Yeah.
probably require a pretty hefty increase in 24. I
Cor-
think that's a
correct.
fair,
That's a fair assessment, based on through today, right? I mean, market is down maybe 15-20%, which means 24's rate will probably almost double.
Right.
But,
So-
but to answer Rick's question, yeah, we've already determined or looked into FICA values and IMRF and health and tried to make that as clean as possible or as accurate as possible.
go ahead, Rick.
Well, I appreciate the effort that went into that. I guess with what Jim just said, are we better suited to overfund it this year? So we don't see as much of an increase in fluctuation.
It
for
won't
next
work
year.
that way.
Yeah, it doesn't, they,
I understand it
Yeah.
doesn't, but I'm just saying is for budgeting purposes, you can always return money back to the budget.
but you, yeah, I guess it's more of, that's something we're gonna have to deal with in next year's budget rather
I
than,
know you pay it
Yeah.
in here that it's
Right.
whatever. I guess what I don't like when you sit here and see huge fluctuations year in and year out, you need to tell a story of what your true costs are. And that's what I'm trying to forecast. So.
and I think that's the conversation that we need as finance committee. We need to have that in mind. We're seeing that reduction in IMRF costs this year, but we need to understand that that's going to swing the other way next year. So, Charlie, go ahead.
I know Bob's gonna kill me for saying this, but I think it has to be said. So the amount of work that Bob's doing right now is a lot for two people as it is. The amount that he's asking for, I think is completely appropriate. The only thing that I would say is he's gonna be overrun with all of the different body cams and everything that's going on that I'd almost like to see that if he's gonna have that, to add the including personnel salary outside of Doug and Bob, if they can find somebody, just to help them out. I mean, there's a lot of hearings he's gonna have to deal with, and it's gonna be a lot for my office as it is, but they're also gonna be included because they deal with 80-90% of the felony cases as it is.
That'd be ideal, and no, I'm not gonna kill Trey. That'd be the idea if we, maybe we can have contractual
That's
where there's people we can hire to review this, and there's no benefits or anything. It's just,
We pay them on an hourly basis. And if
Yeah.
this doesn't turn out to
Right.
be as, worst
Right.
case scenario, maybe it's not as bad and you just
Yeah.
spend X versus Y. So.
Mhm.
So when
There's some lawyers out in the rural community who live and work out of their home. It's-
So if we were to make that adjustment, would you like to consider the dollar amount and get back to us, or do you have any off the cuff answers?
Well, I've considered it, and I just thought of it in terms of where Tom Murray started, and that was at 30,000. And that worked out real well for quite a while without any increase, and his increases have been rather incremental. But that it's half of a position, and I just don't know what to expect about the body cam footage, but four guys are taping the same event.
Would we be able to do the same result by offering a per hour basis for when you call them in to add additional staff versus just a flat 30,000?
I don't know the answer to that because of resources. I don't know who we're gonna be able to get. There's so many vacancies out there.
But in contractual services versus salary.
So he doesn't have a contractual services line item. He does have a legal services line
Yeah,
item.
it used to be, I think, contract. Yeah, you're right. It's called legal now. So
So that would be
that's
the-
where that was.
That would be the appropriate place to put it.
Mm.
I do want to follow up with one thing that, that Bob said several times now, but just to point out, if you go into your revenue at the very top of this budget, that we have adjusted, or Bob adjusted, I'm not sure who adjusted for it, but the reimbursement from the state for the public defender right here, this line right here, last year was 46,000, and we have adjusted that because, as Bob points out, increasing him to full-time allows a greater reimbursement to come back from the state of Illinois for his salary. And that reimbursement's 2/3, essentially 2/3 of his salary comes back from the state. So that I just wanted to point out that while it didn't appear with his expense section of the budget, we have factored that into the overall budget.
And that's true just on your salary, Bob, or is that
Just my,
just yours?
Which again is the benefit of having Bob go to full-time versus him having him hire somebody separately. That other person wouldn't qualify for this reimbursement.
well, I would be willing to go almost full-time as long as you don't have me close my doors downtown, because that's my retirement gig. So I'd certainly, if Tom retired today, I'd take over his misdemeanors for what you're paying him, which wouldn't be a full-timer salary, but you'd still get all that reimbursement money and make the 20,000 net back and then some. And then when I retire, that person would probably not be interested in private practice.
Statute doesn't mind. It's probably affordable.
As long as you don't pay me 90% or 90% of what Charlie makes. So, yeah, if you pay me 85% of it, then the statute doesn't matter.
So the change that we're contemplating here is adding a $30,000 increase to the legal services line item.
Correct. That's what we just discussed.
So that would take your bottom line from 308 to 338, 158.
Bob, I'm sure it's scary. That was all.
Oh, yeah.
Over the years.
This whole thing is scary. That's for sure.
Should we call the paramedics, Bob?
That's right.
Thanks for the offer. No, I appreciate that your understanding. I know you know, every year we go through this, a lot of you, the faces stay the same, but you know, I try to bring you a pretty good picture of what we're doing.
So currently in your part-time line item, we've got budgeted 2,500.
Yeah, we're not using it.
So if we take that out, it's only an increase of 27.5.
I can just tell you, we're not using it. I mean, it's nice that it's there, but we used it when Nikki went out on maternity leave.
Right.
If she did again, we would use it. But right now, I don't know what her plans are. And I don't ask.
That's a good answer.
So that's why it's, you know, it's comfortable to have it there. We do have someone who's willing to come in. She's retired, Vanessa Broom. And she does a capable job. She gets the messages answered and that sort of thing. And, you know, but she's not Nikki, so.
All right. Any
Yeah,
other
I'll be
questions?
giving all that back this year. from what I can expect.
Any other questions for Bob? Doug?
Hey, good.
Paul, is this already the goal of the three that's coming from, are these all figures
Correct.
of now?
Yes, they are.
This is already plugged in.
This is already in it. It is, yes, that's, so we're not increasing any deficit that we currently have right now because it's already factored in.
With the exception of, with the exception of the 30,000, we just talked about adding,
Yeah,
that
that
wasn't
would be
in,
the
but everything else, yeah.
That would be the.
So, and as a reminder, we were at 172 and change, and then we added the $100,000 of contingency, so that's 272. Now we're right at 300. Just wanted to keep the scorecard going. All right. Bob's making sure his numbers are matching up.
Yep.
Okay, everything good? All right. Any other questions for Bob? Yeah, John. Yeah, John, Mike.
Bob and Charlie both carry extremely high cases. But I want to thank Bob for not bringing in the stacks of files that he had as he did 3 years ago, Bob.
Yeah, oh
probably.
yeah,
I don't know if the old elevator would handle it, to tell you the truth.
yeah. I spilled those files on Galena Avenue. What happened?
That was more than a couple of years.
Yeah, that's been a while. You're right.
That
Because
made, that made an impression, I have to admit.
Yeah, well, Charlie's great to work with. Probably out of the 7 states attorneys I've worked with, I consider him number one. Really, he's been that good.
That's high praise. Yep. All right, anything else for Bob? Hearing none, thanks, Bob. Appreciate you coming in and being part of the process, what you do. Stacy, I'm just gonna, I'm not gonna have you and Amy argue over who's gonna go, so I'm just gonna call on you. Come on down. This just gives us more time to grill Amy.
So the potential change coming up here, starting in January for our office, really should not impact the county financially at all, is what I'm hoping. What I've asked, how it will change in my office is those court hearings that take place on Saturdays, Sundays, and possibly Mondays when there's a court holiday, there has to be a bond report that's prepared for the court. So with that, I will need to have 1 to 2 staff come into the courthouse to prepare that report. So it's prepared and filed before the actual court hearing takes place that day. So what I'm asking for my office is, instead of asking for an overtime line item, which I don't have, is if maybe we can work for throughout the next year on a compensation schedule, as far as getting comp time off or a flex schedule. So if they're going to work a Saturday, maybe they would take a Friday off. I don't know how well this is going to work, and I certainly don't have the approval from the staff yet to say, yes, this will definitely work with them. I have another staff meeting scheduled for next week where I'm hoping to get a little bit more feedback from them. But that's really where I'm standing at, is that since I don't have an overtime line item, I'm not asking for one. I'm asking more of my staff to work cordially throughout the next 12 months, January through December of 23, in order to see how this is going to impact our office, how our numbers are going to be changed, how many reports we're going to have to do on the weekends, and what that's going to look like. Time-wise, as far as doing a bond report, if we have somebody with a lengthy criminal history and that criminal history comes from Cook County, it could take 2 hours to do a bond report on just one person. We might be looking at one person, we might be looking at 4 people. The length of time that it will take will depend on that amount of criminal history that has to be gathered and be put into that bond report. We also do a face-to-face interview with the individual that's incarcerated at the jail in order to gather some information for that report, which will go into that and be filed with the court that day. So financially, I don't see any impact to the county for this program coming up from my department. I hope.
And that's because of the offset with reimbursement from the state. So as your costs, as you're adding staff, that reimbursement is offsetting that increase in cost.
Right. So in my office, we receive reimbursement from the state in regards to a salary subsidy position or grant and aid positions. Grant and aid positions get reimbursed at the rate that the state sets forth, which for the last 4 years has been at 100%. The salary subsidy positions, which I only have one, gets reimbursed at $12,000 per year, regardless of what that salary is. I have not asked for additional staff to be able to accommodate these pretrial changes coming up. We're going to try and manage this with what we have. I do have a request into the administrative office right now for an additional staff in my office, which I'm just waiting for word back on whether that's been approved or not. I would only accept that position if it was a grant and aid position, so it would be reimbursed at 100%. But where we're seeing an impact is in the number of pre-sentence investigation reports that are requested by the court. So that's kind of where I'm at. And it's just a wait and see to see if that's going to be a position that's approved or not.
So is the salary overtime line item that, is that reimbursable or is that to our costs?
We don't have an overtime line item in probation. And that's really what I would,
So because I'm looking at the salary overtime. Fiscal year.
$2,000.
$2,000 in the 22 budget.
right, what that is we have one secretary. We used to have 1.5 secretaries. We have one secretary. She works 8 to 4:30. However, she should only be working a 35-hour work week, 8 to 4. So what we do is give her the option to accrue overtime for that additional half hour from 4 to 4:30, or she can accrue comp time. So she does a mix of that throughout the year. So we have an overtime budget in there of $2,000 for her for throughout that year, if that makes sense.
What's the sick pay line item?
I'm not really sure. Probably what that is when employees leave, they get paid out sick time that they have in the bank.
That's correct.
This is the only, I mean, I just glanced, but the only one that I've seen that has the sick pay line item.
Yeah, I usually don't have that in my budget either.
So that's not, is that something that can be removed as at $3,500? Or is that something that you anticipate you're going to need in there?
It should be banked. I don't know why it would be if you comes right out of your salary and it's banked, it shouldn't be an expense.
Sick pay actually, I think it's paid from the state reimbursement, actually.
From the state reimbursement, Stacy, so that maybe that's why you're unique in that if you're getting reimbursed for it, we have to allocate or account for it within your budget.
Yeah.
That's probably what it is, why it's different. Paul's shaking his head,
Paul
yes.
shaking his head, because we were at 0
You-
last year.
Yeah, you have to, if you're gonna get reimbursed through the state, they want to see the actual value, right, that you're paying out. And so I believe we added that line this year in there to show the sick pay that's being paid.
Not an expense of the fall if you've got a bank and paid for.
Yeah, it's not, it's really, right, it's part of your salary, right, or part of your pay.
Well,
It's
that-
just broken out into a different line.
And it affects the bottom line though in the budget, where it's double dipping, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Well, unless we anticipate the 3,500 in the budget and it's not in the full-time. That it's out of full-time and into the sick pay. I'll take a note to just validate that, just to make sure.
If you could look at the sheriff's line item too, they've got a $52,000 line item in there for sick pay.
Yeah, now that's probably the payout for the retirement people that are leaving. They take their sick pay.
Sure, but
in
again, that
increments.
should already been taken out as they earned it.
No, they're
If
getting,
if it's banked, that probably isn't recognized
Well, it should be.
until it's taken.
correct.
So it would be listed as a deferred expense
Correct.
than a current expense.
Yeah, I mean, as a cash basis, we don't show a deferred expense, but
Right.
the auditors do in their report, because they're always looking for, okay, how many head count and what's their sick time available, and they'll add that as a deferred cost.
But we will circle back and just check on that.
Yeah,
But I think
I'll make sure the exact value of that 3,341 and then what's in that, what that is.
Any other questions for Stacy?
Just to be clear, I don't have the approval of staff to say, yes, we're gonna do comp time or flex time. So if they all decide, no, that's not the route we're going, that very well could open up our union contract again. And we're gonna have to make some fast tracks to figure out how we're gonna get those reports completed starting in January for the court. And how to cover the cost of having officers in the courthouse on a Saturday, Sunday, or Monday to do these reports.
So I don't have the contract in front of me. The verbiage for the right to schedule, is it specific Monday through Friday, or is it just you have the right to schedule? I can't remember.
No, it identifies that they work 35 hours a week, Monday through Friday, in between the hours of 8 and 4:30.
We talked about this a couple years ago, when this first started, so.
Yeah.
first one.
We've known that this has been coming for a while, so it's been talked within our office. And we're trying to make it work the best that we can, just to kind of get an eye on it and get a good gauge on what this is gonna look like as far as the impact. Before we do anything drastic.
Probably would be a good idea to amend the contract if the staff does agree to it, though.
We have a negotiations that'll open up, that contract will expire November of next year, but yeah, if they don't agree to doing count time or flex time, there'll have to be a lot of changes all across the board.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Stacy. Appreciate it. Amy, come on down.
So for Dave's sake, in the back of the room, Amy is our last one on this topic, and then you're up next. So don't go away.
Morning.
Morning.
I think everyone summed it all up. So you guys have a great, big, huge picture, right? of What's gonna happen. But mainly in my budget, what's gonna change, can you hear me? Am I okay? Is obviously the no cash bail. So that's gonna hurt our office quite a bit. Judge Ackert mentioned like a $400,000 cash bail that we brought in, but that was over a 5-year time period. So in doing the math, on average for the past 5 years, we brought in about 47,000 in county general. So that's where you'll see my fees going down there, about 50,000 in my proposal. In other funds, I dropped those as well on a best guesstimate, because I can't anticipate what's going to happen until we start this. Seriously, I have no idea how it's going to work. So I think after a few months going into January, February, March, we'll get an idea. We can maybe revisit. I don't know if we can change it then, but it might have to be changed. The other big thing in county general is I increased numbers for salaries to account for raises because we have raises coming up and one new position if the board allows for that. Because obviously we're going to have to do weekend court and we have to bring people in. The third change I did in county general is I increased numbers for overtime to cover that weekend court. It's kind of based on a general calculation, which in the CBA does allow for overtime over 40 hours. It's time and a half. So I use a figure of 4 hours. I think that hopefully would be a good number on a Saturday or Sunday in court. I know that's Rock Island County does it that way. And there is nothing for holidays, but I did ask my employees how they wanted to handle holidays. They would like to be paid double time if they had to come in on a holiday, which Rock Island County does that as well. So I do have a little bit of overtime in my child support fund. So if the $10,000 is unacceptable, we can change some numbers there. But that's my main big things for county general.
So
I did
just to recap, Amy, so it's a reduction in your overall revenue by 40 to 50,000. It is an increase of 1 headcount staff full-time person and an increase in your overtime. Is that
Correct, correct. That's the main big ones.
Any questions for Amy? Go ahead, Greg.
Paul, I guess back to the health insurance, I didn't know this was an added position in here, but we went from 89,000 only to 91,000 for health insurance. Should we bump that up to, I guess, account for additional headcount?
I mean, I would look at that more as just your increased cost of healthcare year over year.
Right.
Not so much an additional head count.
So you've got an additional headcount factored in here, is that what?
I do not,
You do not?
No.
Oh, okay, I misunderstood you then.
unless, you didn't do that right with this, okay,
I'm talking about in your salary line item.
no, not with
But you're looking to add somebody,
yes, I am.
so that would increase your salary even more than.
No, the That is included. I'm sorry.
That's what I was. yeah,
Yes,
just
no,
wanna
no.
Make sure.
The raises and the one-time, a new hire is included in that full-time, 392,000. That is included in there.
So
Sorry.
yes, I think we should, if that's the case, increase our health insurance line item.
I've got that. I've got a note here.
I can tell you that 2 of my employees had different insurance because they didn't make enough to pay for our insurance, but now with the raises, I think only one, yeah, so. And I am short just one. I just lost one employee, so
I know we'll have to add 2 to the health insurance line item.
possibly.
Yeah.
It
and
depends
again,
on, you know,
I
their
mean,
situation, if they're married and take the
Yeah.
husband or
Yeah,
wife
it's,
insurance.
it's a forecast.
it just
right? So-
depends. You don't know.
Well, if we're anticipating, at least one head count, yeah, we're gonna have to.
Definitely add that. And I've got that note. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And that would probably impact, just at a guess. We're probably looking at increase of $15,000 on that line item.
Yeah, again, depending on what level of coverage, right?
So was FICA and IMRF calculated an additional head count? Do you know, Paul?
Well, typically those will just be a percentage of the total value of pay. Or base, pay minus your deductions get you to your FICA. And your IMRF is calculated as at that point too. And again, you're going to see a reduction in the IMRF just based on the rate we're going to pay for 23. Oh, I would think almost every department for IMRF is going to see a reduction year over year, budget to budget.
Yeah, it looks like it's $8,000 less calculated.
Yeah, because this year's rate was 5.8 and next year's rate is almost 3.
Is there a base though per each employee?
No, it's just that rate times their salary.
Committee have any other questions for Amy? Hearing none. Thanks, Amy. Appreciate it. And Paul you're going to add in one head count or why don't we do 2?
Yeah,
You're going
I've
to
got
do
a
2,
note here
if she anticipates and one of those other, new employees that are going to come on. And if
an
that's
old
not
employee
reflected,
might take it. So yeah, we can
Yeah.
definitely add 2.
yeah, I'd say add 2. Okay. All right. Well, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. And I know it's a little painful, but anyway, thanks for coming in and presenting. So appreciate what you guys do. It's 10:20. Why don't we take a quick 5-minute break and come back? Well, let's make it 5 minutes. Let's make it a quick break. We'll start up again at 25 after.
I'm trying to think of who I would recognize as your employee. One of these, like that's just, oh, that's.
Change. The thing.
These guys, every one of these.
Yeah.
Well, this guy, I don't know who it is. So what he's doing. Is
Yeah.
That's what that charge is.
Well, when I have those things, I don't see it. It's up at 4 and then.
So it went under 0. So I'm gonna find who's 3,500 belongs to because that's what it is. If you got.
Yeah, I was watching the river ride last night. Get a boat out. This morning, I'm right on. It'll surround my house. So this morning, it wasn't too bad. It's just a bank. I'm the full right of County Road. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking here,
Hurry up.
because she, so Paula reclassed all of this out based on this payroll,
Are we gonna be okay?
based on these payrolls. So that's why I'm like, okay, somebody, see, it's the same names here, right? That's my term.
Seems high. Seems high.
But that she, that fear is that she extrapolate that out, which I don't, know why she.
Oh, yeah, you know, that's true. I was up in that is crazy. Valley where
I don't know, I wouldn't be
you
sure.
know, just north of Hanover.
I can't find anybody in your.
North of Hanover. It's already so unbelievable.
Then, you know, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, a couple of years, you start loading up, so you get that down.
Water receipts.
Yeah,
I fish a lot. My garbage man. Cause I fish on Saturday, I'll usually take grandkids. And fish guts gotta wait till Tuesday. And it's a hot day, I just really feel sorry.
Anymore, they just got those grabbers that come out of the side of the truck.
Yeah,
Dumping in.
yeah, I don't think he would. Yeah, anyway.
All right.
That would be, that is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know.
Okay. Good.
That's all, that's not far away. Now.
Huh? My dad would say, well,
Square. I got signed.
finally with the hole in your.
It is. Made it through the whole.
Yeah. I ended up with like a 2.5 and then. Guys.
Oh my God. It's BS for days.
So. That
And then
offsets.
Saturday. Never let you put me in the center. Can't stop.
I know, that's,
Well,
you said-
Can't stop. I think it's gonna rain. Some of the movements, other movements going on. You're looking at this little line, you go, this thing is just coming through, just like right on all stuff. That's it. Like just a little, we should have. I should have written off. All of a sudden you can hear it.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know what the. Hey, Dave. So this is one. Oh, yeah. Social justice. No. That's so true. Don't do good job, but don't do stuff for the weapon. But I can still like person. Like 3 o'clock with hands on it. You know, and I was, God, I am. No, no. Yeah, yeah.
They like the Romans.
Oh, it's funny you say that, but the 7th grade, we had a teacher.
I'm hard to follow.
No. No check to balance.
All right. So it is 25 after +1. So we will reconvene and we're into transportation and Mr. Anderson is here.
Yep.
Yeah, we've not made anybody cry yet.
Okay, well, I'll try not to be the first. Hold them back.
Bad.
The meeting.
Huh?
Dave did it. No, not
Oh,
Dave. You know, when I called you.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's all right.
Yeah,
It's a second one.
that's right. No, I know. I double checked that Friday before I left work. Wait a minute, we don't have a meeting Monday.
I kept going through all. I did it right. I even. Accidentally.
Okay, where am I missing? What page are we on?
I'm trying to find it. I let you know.
Yeah,
Hey,
let me
Mr.
know.
Paul, can you point everybody in the right direction about
Yeah,
what,
what
where
what
we're at?
page are we on for Dave's budget?
Because I'm still scrambling to find it.
You know what?
On board?
On board. But he's on
Highway budget. It was in the highway fund.
Yeah,
Oh, well, that would make sense.
oh, that's right. This is, I gotta get out of this.
Which one do you want to do first?
Close that.
I'm leaving. I know you're one of the most anal guys here. There we go.
Everybody find the highway folder.
Do you want to do, okay,
Highway came up.
I'm in.
Is that all right?
how about solid waste?
Here.
Oh, yeah, we could do solid waste.
Well, I mean, I don't care which one goes first. So you want to do highway first?
Yeah, let's do highway.
Okay.
first.
Yeah, let's do highway first.
That's not, where are we at in resources?
Yep.
Where are we at?
Go into the first.
Oh, highway. Okay.
Yeah, so you'll have, highway, county special bridge, county matching, county MID. Is that all on the same sheet
Yep,
there?
special bridges in the
Okay.
same.
Gotcha.
Yep, we're all in the same folder here.
All right.
Yeah, just gotta make sure everybody's on the same page. There we go.
Lost control, Mr. Chairman.
Oh,
Yeah.
always lose control. I do have a gavel. Okay, sidebar conversation, Mr. Rudolphy. All right. David, go ahead.
Okay. All right, so we're on county highway.
I will go through and just point out just a couple things in all these particular line items that may be of interest, and then I'll let you ask some questions. This one here is fairly, actually the easiest one I have to put together, because you maybe just adjust a few of the line items from year to year. They're pretty static, but if you look at one of the salary others line item, I believe it is, looks like it's gone down. You might wonder, I don't know what you're showing there. Looks like it's gone down. What we've done, or what I've done, is I've not hired back an engineering technician. So if you're looking, you're wondering, well, why is the line item gone down 65,000? That's the reason. You might say, well, boy, that's great, saving 65,000. Sorta. Just to let you know, when you still got so many hours worth of work to get done. You don't have those people there. So from time to time, we'll have consultants come in and do some of that work.
So David, is that position that we tried to create as that hybrid thing of, getting somebody, that's not the same position, is
Oh,
it?
no, this
No.
would be a straight engineering technician. What I did is I kind of shuffled our existing personnel around just a little bit to accommodate the busy construction season so that we can keep everything covered under construction. And then we should be fine during the off construction timeframes. But there's still a lot of work to get done to put everything together for the following year. And there'll be, I'm just saying, from time to time, there'll be consultants that need to be hired to get some of that work done. So it's not a complete $65,000 savings. So just to let you know that, and that those monies will come from other funds, quite honestly. It'll most likely come from county matching and some from Special Bridge, and we pay those consultants. So and that also depends on project load. So that's kind of one thing that you may see that jumps out. The other thing that jumps out is on your furniture and equipment, there's 550,000. So last year, for whatever reason, $548,000 got put in the furniture and equipment line item. That was a total cost. That was to get broken up, but we just let it ride. The reason it stands at 550 is because we're not able to actually physically procure the truck that we ordered this year until next year's budget. So I got to carry that. I got to carry that along and then order one for the previous year, assuming we'll be able to pay for it in 2023. We probably won't, but I just want to keep that plugged in there. So it's budgeted. So we're going to have to kind of keep a mental running score of where we're at in terms of what we ordered, when they're going to be delivered, and when they're going to get paid for in these budget years as we work out supply chain problems. Other than that, there are just minor, really kind of, as I see it, fairly minor adjustments to any of the line items. So is there any questions on this one?
Any questions for David? Doug?
Yeah.
I know we spoke in finance,
Dave? Oh, Doug. Dave, Doug.
spoke in finance. About the possible addition of buildings, where's that in? Jim or Dave?
Well, those monies would be within your capital projects
Right.
or the ARPA money or some such thing. It wouldn't be in either any of these funds that we're talking about, at least at this point. And really the status of that is pretty well in flux.
Right,
So I don't know is the honest answer. I think what you see in the 2023 capital budget, you'll see $1 million. It's basically a plug number. It's to secure something there, but I don't know. I don't know how it's going to pan out.
I knew that was in the capital, but I wasn't
Yep.
sure if any other wasn't covered and was in the budget here, your budget.
No, it's not.
Okay.
So Dave.
Yeah.
I believe in our capital line item, we've got $200,000 set aside for a truck.
Okay.
So my question is, in your furniture line item, is the
Yep.
truck in here also? Is it?
Yeah, there's,
So that's a double dip.
yeah, if you've got a truck in the capital, that doesn't necessarily have to be in there. What's in the capital was 100,000, I believe, and that was for At least what I thought was in there. It's 100,000. That was for smaller, updating the smaller vehicles on a yearly basis. Because the 200,000 that's in there, that right now, I think we're gonna blow past that on a truck. Unfortunately. It used to be, I could figure a tandem at around 175 or 180. It'll be over 200 now, I think.
So right now on the capital budget, we do have 200,000 listed for a dump truck.
Okay.
So that can come off.
Well, we probably need to leave it in capital and take it out of his furniture and light it.
Right, you can
Is
do
what
that.
I would say. Leave it in capital because it is a capital purchase.
That'd be the best option.
So take it out of the.
Leave it in capital and you can take it off the furniture and equipment in the highway.
You mentioned two trucks. One of these isn't carrying over and one of them's.
One's carrying over and one's would be one we're gonna order.
So should we have two in there, one on furniture and equipment, one on capital?
No, we had them both. We had one in capital last year. One in capital this year. They should still be there. Or the money comes back if it was in the furniture line item, if they didn't spend it, which it was in 2021. So the money should come
Yeah,
back.
yeah, I don't know if there was one in there from last year or not, or if there was
There was.
okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, is there any advantage? And I'm trying to think, is there any advantage of leaving those trucks in that equipment and furniture
You
line
can-
item rather than having them in capital for?
Oh, okay.
Paul?
I don't know where you would gain an advantage on either side because as a cash basis, right, you're either going to pull it out of your reserves, which is your capital. The advantage, if you want to look at it from what I'm seeing is, hey, you've got a $500,000 expenditure through highway, but it doesn't necessarily go through. Is that?
It doesn't hit the highway fund. In other words, there's an extra 500,000 in the highway fund. Not that you have to go spend it this year, but it's
Yeah.
there.
I don't think highway doesn't run. That's not going to help our general, if you will. Because it's not in the 001 fund.
So
Okay.
for example, we're showing the fund balance beginning estimated cash balance and the ending cash balance. It's going to change that. It's not going to help us in the general side with
Yeah,
our deficit.
yeah.
Correct.
However, I do agree it is a capital purchase. So as long as,
I was gonna ask that too, Dave, or to you, was why do we have this in equipment and furniture? Because really, in my mind, it's a capital purchase.
It could be every single year as far as I'm concerned, but I mean, historically,
Other
with-
than-
with the highway levy,
Yeah,
I have to go back about, and you've all probably heard this song and dance for quite a while now. I have to go back about 15 years. And we pretty much were able to use the levy and buy the equipment out of the levy. About 15 years ago, our insurance and IMRF started coming out without replacement, and then that's when we couldn't buy anything out of the levy. And we kind of had to sort of every now and then get something out of capital. So that's kind of the history on it and why it's historically come out of this budget, but it's been hit and miss since insurance and IMRF were removed without replacement.
Marilyn?
Dave, I know you're always trying to update your truck fleet, but it's rather old fleet, honestly. If we've got a truck in furniture and equipment, we've got a truck in capital. Is there a possibility that for next year, we could order 2 trucks in addition to the one that's already in the pipeline?
Yeah, we can order 2 next year.
What is your?
It'll be a ways.
Well, that'd be a total of 3
It'd be a total of 3.
because you've got one.
Correct.
2021
Correct,
already in there.
correct,
Plus you got one forecast for 2022.
correct.
I know.
But how old is your fleet? I guess that's.
I didn't bring my sheet of paper on that. The fleet's around an average age of around 8 years-ish.
So the 550 you have in 2023, is that assuming a new truck plus the one from last year?
Yes, That's what I'm saying. I have to assume.
Right.
The one I order for 23 is gonna come in 23. I'm gonna pay it 23. Probably won't happen, but I'm assuming that. Plus, I know I'm gonna have to pay for my
Well,
2022.
what I'm
truck
saying is
in
you got
23.
1.1 million between the 2 years in that line item, and you're gonna spend 500,000.
At this point, correct.
So there's an extra 600,000 to put back into the budget somewhere. Plus the 200 or 400,000 we got in capital. So there's $1 million basically that can go back in somewhere. Am I wrong?
Well, you're not gonna get a truck.
Yeah, you're not getting the truck,
You're
so
not
it's
getting the
really a
trucks.
carryover value that he's doing.
Say that again?
So that's not, so the 500,000 or the 2 trucks he is planning on ordering.
Correct.
So if you're going to do that, then he's going to lose those trucks.
No. How's he gonna lose them?
Because
He's already got, he already got one order, correct?
Correct.
So he's got one order and he's gonna order another one. He's gonna end up with 2 at some point in time. I don't know when they're gonna be delivered.
Correct.
Well,
I'm-
yeah, I see
But what I'm
where you're
saying is-
going, but you're going to have to, I mean, that, how do you know when that truck's going to show up?
That doesn't matter. What I'm saying is there's more money set aside than what he's gonna need, regardless of when they come in.
So your 1.1, you've got 200,000 in capital and you've got
Technically got
550.
400,000. Technically, we had 400,000. We had 200,000 for this year and 200,000 for next year in capital for trucks. That's 400,000.
Okay, that's where you're coming up.
We got in here 1.1 million in his line item, which is a double overlap anyway. So that's 1.5 million. And
No,
we're
just
No,
550.
no.
Just 550 is all.
Yeah, 550.
No, because last year we had it in there too. It was double accounted for last year. You got 548,000 in 2022's budget.
Yeah, but actually it'd only be half of that amount. But this is why it gets confusing when you can't.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. here. I'm
Get a
trying to
truck
talk
in the
through
year you
this.
ordered it, but.
So I'm trying to talk through this to make sure know where we're at. The
I
money's been
see-
allotted.
I see where you're
Boy, I
going.
wish you were right because that would take care of our general
Actually,
overall budget problem.
You're right. I mean, last
actually,
year,
Rick, if you it just.
You had an
if
excavator
you-
last
if
year,
you
right?
take- Yeah, if you take your 1.1, you back off 250, then I think you're in the right spot.
Correct.
Hey, Jim, and Rick, and you get, this is in, all of this fund, if you will, is 041. It's county highway fund. It's not general fund.
yeah,
I understand that, Paul, but
So even if we saved $500,000, it doesn't save our county
I-
general
yeah.
deficit.
Sorry.
Just gonna
Thanks
result in-
for that reminder.
coming out of 2 different spots.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what it does though is it affects fund balances.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
It's gonna affect his fund balance.
So I guess what do you want to reflect this accurately? Because now we're talking basically transparency. So we understand what's going on
Well, it
year to year.
Either comes out of his highway fund or it comes out of capital fund. It doesn't come out of both.
So do we leave things the way they're presented and then remove the 200,000? We would remove the 200,000 out of capital for 23 and 24. Is that what we're talking about?
Well, again, it's a capital purchase. You would adjust your fund balance and leave it in capital since it's already accounted for there. And just adjust your fund balances in your highway fund.
So we've got a lot of capital requests for this year. And so that might be also something you want to percolate on for a little while and decide when we're addressing the sum total of the capital, what makes the most sense. I do agree this is a capital purchase, but you've also got a lot of pressure on the capital budget right now.
Well, that's
So I say-
that's where I was going.
So
Well, at the end of the day, I mean, our capital request, I think we have discussed that we probably need to do something long-term. So, I mean, until we get to that point, it's just should be noted that the trucks are accounted for in two different places.
Right. This is probably a good segue to let you all know that I do have an appointment. Paula and I are meeting with a bond company on Monday at 3 p.m. And they're going to start gathering information to be able to give us some options for that capital budget. I will say that in order to borrow money, the county's no different than you and I are, and that you've got to be able to sustain that with a revenue stream. And so that's the only word of caution I would give you is I'm not sure exactly what that revenue stream would be right now, which is why we're consulting with the bond company, because they probably have more expertise in this area than I do. But nonetheless, we're following through with that request and we'll report back. And maybe that's the time to circle back to this capital budget when we have a better idea of what we can bond out.
So you're just gonna kind of discuss at a later date how you want to handle the trucks or what funds it comes out of. Okay.
Which may be a nice segue into your next fund, which is special bridge.
Special bridge, okay. Oh, there's nothing. I mean, it gets fairly deep in the weeds how the money transfers around in here actually, but you got your levy, then you see a township bridge reimbursement. That's actually going to be for a bridge that actually we just started yesterday on a township. We front the money out of that. Then once everything's all said and done, final out, IDOT has signed a final letter on that. Then what I do is I start transferring money, and 80% of the costs will be covered by the Township Bridge Fund, which is an MFT derivative, but it's not a budgeted thing for you folks. And then 10% will come from the township. So that's what that reimbursement is that you see showing up there. Then we always have different drainage projects that we enter into jointly by statute with townships and or municipalities of a certain size. You'll see some contractual services there for $300,000, basically somewhat of a plug number there too, because I am finding that our 1960s and 1950s concrete deck slab bridges are having some deck issues. And you can't really see those because many of them got a hot mix overlay, but they're starting to show up underneath and so forth, or they're popping off on the top. So just as in general, for about somewhere around 100 grand, I can come in, I can take off the top. I'm not going to go into total details there because it gets complicated. There's different methods, and put a new top basically on the deck. So that's where some of that comes from. And we'll identify those as we go and hopefully keep up on those. It's kind of a nice way to extend the life of your bridge another, hopefully 20 years plus. So it's a lot cheaper than a replacement at this point. Other than that, that's special bridge.
Dave,
Yes.
you mentioned that you had a couple of bridges that were supposed to be condemned or needed work. I think one was in West Brooklyn, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we've got that one in the works even right now.
Is that in here somewhere? Or?
Yeah, that will come mostly out of county matching, actually. Yep, that's figured into my county matching. I've got you don't see it in here, but on your budget, but on my budget worksheets that I do for myself, I did turn them in. I don't know if maybe you guys do have them. I have I got $425,000 figured in from county matching for that particular project, and then another 100,000 from rebuild home life funds. So speaking of that, you want to move to county matching?
I want to talk about the federal aid matching. What goes into that one?
So the next one. The next one.
Yeah.
Okay. What's your question?
Well, I'm concerned, or I'm looking at, you have approximately, if these balances are correct, 1 million. At the end of the year, you're 200,000 in the hole, so. In the fund
Yeah,
balance.
the way I've got it figured is, I'll still have a pretty, which one is it? Fairly healthy cash balance of 500,000. I had a million nine at the beginning of the year. Should have 1.9 million in there. That's what I had.
As in 1.9 million?
Yeah.
Just checking. All right,
Well-
so what you're seeing is 1 million in our records.
I mean, I guess I'm concerned that we're, 900,000. Might not seem like a lot of money to some, but that's.
Yeah, I don't know. That's been our standing. That's been a balance that we've carried and carried and carried and carried and carried. So it's,
So,
if you want to double check it.
So that is-
double Check it, but it's there.
I guess when you say you have 1.9 million,
Yep.
but the treasurer's office says we have 1 million. I mean, who actually holds the purse string? Is it in the state or we have it here?
No,
physically?
that's in our treasury. Yeah. County
Well,
manager.
that's a big difference.
Yeah, just double check it.
It's not like 90,000 or
Right.
$9.
Just double
or-
check it. Yep. Just double check it. So what happens with this is I got 500 and almost $63,000 that is still outstanding for projects already built. And I got to carry that in there as well. And so I figure that's going to get paid. Plus I figure that everything that we do gets paid, okay, in the current year, which it usually doesn't. Here's the deal. We do a job, we do a federal funded job. IDOT administers, we conduct the job. IDOT administers the finances on that, okay? That federal money never hits our treasury. They pay the contractor after we tell them what to pay. And then at the end of the job, when it's all finalized out, they send us a bill for our 20%. Okay? Well, I got jobs on here from 2018, 2019, 2021, and 2022 that haven't been paid for. Our share has not been paid for, amounts to about $563,000. I'm assuming I'm going to pay every bit of that next year. Then I go through the jobs that I'm going to do in the coming year in 2023. And I'm assuming I'm paying for all those jobs in the current year. Now, they're not all federally funded jobs. You can use this money if you have state or federal money in it. So most of the time with seal coat work, I'll put say $10,000 of motor fuel tax money into the job. And I'll match that with say $80,000 of our county matching. And we'll do our county seal coat program. I'll do that with some other stuff. Probably the bigger ones will be potentially a hot mix job if one comes up that we can do. I'll throw a little MFT in there. So anyway, yeah, that's why you see a big number is I'm assuming everything comes due next year. I have to because it could.
But with all that being
Probably
said,
won't.
shouldn't the fund balances match?
So here, the fund balance as of today is 1.9. What you're seeing there on that spreadsheet is, it says 1 million, my sheet says 1.2, is the beginning estimated cash balance at the end of 22, beginning of 23. So in other words, mine says 1.2 because it's 1.9 minus the 710,000 theoretically in the 22 budget, if it all actually came to that, would leave him with 1.2 as a beginning fund balance in 23. And then the estimated ending cash balance, even though, so there's a $200,000 delta there, but I show 14 grand still sitting in there by the end of 23, if everything comes to actual on that budget. So that's where, yeah, it's the beginning, that estimated beginning fund balance is as of the end of November, 1st of December this year. Oh, does that help?
Dave, that money's just sitting there waiting to pay bills and get them.
The fair share of it, yes.
Now I'm cooking jar. I'm taking it down and down. That's why I say.
Right.
Should be done.
It is.
Yes.
Okay, so this really just needs to be resolved because what we're seeing is different than what you
Well,
just,
What you're seeing is an estimate of the beginning fund balance for 23. It's, Dave's right, as of right now, today, right? He's at 1.9 million in his fund balance.
Right.
Physically, we agree, we are there.
what I'm saying is you were showing,
Yeah,
you're showing $14,000 and what we have here is 211.
Yeah,
in
so we just
deficit.
need a quick cleanup of,
We need to clean that up.
yeah, yep.
The other thing that's gonna make that look better is Paul's figuring I'm gonna spend every dime that I had appropriated this year.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna. There's
Yeah.
gonna be, I'm figuring at least 500,000 I'm not gonna spend, so.
well, I mean, I'm only
It's better
figuring
you just
based
have
on the
paid it out.
value.
No, there's some stuff I just didn't spend, you know, so.
Everybody clear what's going on there? Clear as mud.
That's what I was
Yeah.
gonna say.
Dave's used to this. He's a standard operating procedure.
Yeah, I mean, if you do have more questions, let me know. I mean, I'm. Want to jinx myself, I'm pretty comfortable with it, so I.
All right, do you want to move on to county motor fuel tax?
County motor fuel. Okay, the only thing I can say about this one is this one, and pretty much everything in here is fairly status quo, okay? But just, I'm saying this mostly so that maybe remember this in a future board meeting, future conversation we might have. Because I wasn't quite sure what to do with this. So when the capital bill was passed in what, 18, 19, wherever that was, there was Rebuild Illinois funds that came into every county, every township, et cetera. Those for us, because we exceeded the threshold, those had some restrictions on them. We could only spend them for what was termed a bondable project. Somebody had to come up with a definition of that. So at any rate, basically, I needed to save up all of that Rebuild Illinois money before I could do a job. Because it came in 6 different allotments, twice a year for 3 years at, I don't know, $245,000 an allotment. I really can't do much with $200,000-$400,000. So I'm waiting until that all comes in. It's gonna be about 1.1 or 1.2 million. Then I'm gonna spend it. I got a job that I kind of earmarked that I'm gonna use that on. But it's not reflected in here. And I don't know if it really needs to be or not. But there's going to be 1.1 because you're going to have to pass a resolution to appropriate that money at some point for that job. You'll see this resolution come through. So it will get appropriated, whether it's in this budget or not. And the reason I'm saying I don't know if it's in this budget or not is because it's considered a grant by IDOT. Now, the MFT is a standard allotment, statutory allotment. That's been around since whatever, 1962 or something. But this is considered a grant. However, they said this is a grant, but stick it in your MFT account and keep track of it separate, right? So it sits in MFT, but I'm going to spend it separate. All right. So I'm just mostly telling you this to make you aware when you see something come up, Rebuild Illinois funds on a project on an appropriation resolution, that's what it's for. And it's, I guess, technically coming out of our MFT fund because that's where we were told to put it and leave it.
So then
And we have to track that totally separate.
that goes back to the beginning estimated cash balance here. It says 15 or 1.5 million. But you make it sound like there's money over and above that sitting, waiting for this project to come up.
Yeah, there is. There is.
How much do you have stocked away? Because
Well, whatever we've gotten in allotments, it should be up to its, I think we've got our last allotment. If we haven't, it's coming early fall. I can't remember.
I guess one specific question I got is in your expenditure line here, Dave. Last year you had 601,000. This year you jumped it up to 752. You got a
Yeah, that's
project.
basically, that's all materials expenditures and we're just gonna pay more for them this year.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
we
just
just are.
curious.
That's gonna be road rock, patch mix, rock salt for, ice control.
Because as
Sign materials, everything like that.
as end of June, I think this was figured, you only spent 236, so. I didn't know there was a,
No, that you're seeing there is not project specific. That's basically our materials. You'll see, again, we're gonna appropriate this in a county board meeting about November. Anyway, again, even though it's appropriated in here, we have to appropriate it again for IDOT in a resolution, and you'll see that come through.
So going back to the grant from IDOT. Now which line item do you have that?
That's not in there. That's why I'm telling you, it's not in there. It's gonna come through as a whole separate appropriation someday.
Okay,
A resolution, whole separate appropriation.
but
resolution.
when it's spent, but we're holding the money,
Correct. Yes, that's correct.
and that runs through. I guess why is that not in the cash beginning estimated cash balance and there's not a line item for that?
I don't like it either. That's how IDOT.
Well, we gotta be able to know, and same with our auditors. I mean, that's gonna be, isn't that gonna be a discrepancy?
No,
No?
no, it won't, because, and IDOT will specifically audit this RBI money too, as well, and then they will as well. Independent of our auditors.
Yeah, see, I don't want to put words in Dave's mouth and I don't want to say the wrong definition of this, but I mean, again, that beginning cash balance is an estimate for the beginning of next year.
So what Paul's saying is that that's an estimate for the beginning of next year that may or may not be, because I may or may not spend all the money that was appropriated in the current fiscal year.
and I understand all that, but I guess we've acquired, and I'll just pick a number, $2 million in a grant from the state. And it's sitting somewhere.
Yeah, it's in the MFT account. That's where it has to go. That's where
Counter,
it goes.
but it's not
Yeah.
reflecting in the cash balance is what we're saying. I mean, we understand what it's for. You're not gonna spend it until this project gets,
Right.
and you get all the money in, but that should be reflected in the beginning cash balance and
Except for it's really not MFT money. See, I
I understand
don't
that
like
too,
the
but that's,
way it
isn't
all
that where
got-
it's being kept?
it's
Isn't
where
that where
it's
it's being
being kept.
kept?
That's where it's at.
That's, the money's there then.
Shouldn't we handle that just like we handle any other grant income? And have a line item within the county motor fuel tax fund that.
You could do it any
called
which
an
way you
IDOT
want.
grant.
I mean, you're gonna appropriate it anyway. It has to be appropriated separately anyway, whether you put it in this budget or not. We will have to pass a resolution to appropriate it. If you want to put it in there, go ahead. It doesn't bother me at all, but,
It's money we're holding on to. It should be
Yeah.
reflected somewhere. That's all I'm saying.
you can put it somewhere.
I mean, the
You
motor
put it in
fuel,
there, that's
the motor
fine.
fuel tax
Doesn't bother me.
at the beginning of 22, if you will. That fund was 1.962.
I think that's what I got, in my figures too. Well,
So, and then within that
yeah, that's what I got.
I guess from-
1.962 is that.
Dave, I
fund,
hope you
right?
understand that, but when we understand that this is, you do the separate appropriation, it's called, but it raises questions for the county board members every time. Where'd this money come from, where'd it go? And then you have to do, if it was accounted for within the line item, then there's no question, because county board members can look, we can refer them back to the line item and say, this is a grant from IDOT. We were told to put in motor fuel tax. It's really not motor fuel tax, but it's meant for these purposes. And here's the resolution that is spending that. You got a trail. you know, I guess that's about, I think that's where Rick is going.
And we could.
Because there's no
put it in
trail
as-
to this.
What I would do then is, to have it in there, I would put it in as, another line item and
That's-
call it RBI or Rebuild Illinois, whatever. Acronym,
that's-
if you want to use the acronym, go ahead, but I would put it in there. And then that way it's accounted for in the budget. And then we'll pass a resolution separately, because that's what I don't like.
And the
us do.
idea is that the cash balance would grow each year, and then when that project comes up, that's where you draw it from, and then it's no harm, no foul.
Yeah, which it has. And the way I've got it figured is I got the same number starting cash balance as Paul, 1.62 basically. And as I work through my numbers, I actually end up with, and I'm not accounting for this RBI money, okay? I actually end up with a cash balance at the end of 23 of 1.7. All right, now take off the 1.1, which is held in there, and you got a cash balance around 600,000. That's, which
This
is
says
about where it needs to
1.3.
be.
This says 1.3. Is where,
That's because Paul is figuring every dime that was appropriated gets spent, and it won't.
and if it
Yeah.
doesn't, then that just rolls forward. and
That
that's-
just
that's
stays
the way
there.
this works.
It just
So-
stays there. Yeah. Yeah.
But when you spend that money, that, I mean, that resolution that will be brought before the board, that will reflect the accurate amount of dollars of what you're spending out of that money. So, you know, if it's $385,000, that's what the resolution will say. Okay. So Paul, I guess committee, you know,
Yeah, we can definitely add a line in there for Rebuild Illinois, kind of show the value of that. The thing is, you only have, so it's under, so there's a fund, right? That's county MFT in accounting world is a fund of 033. That's the fund number. I'm not. But you only have one fund balance for that. Now, within that, you can use spreadsheets and all kinds of stuff to say, well, hey, of this $2 million, 1.1 is Rebuild Illinois, the rest is motor fuel tax, whatever, right? But again, the accounting system is going to show one fund balance. Now with grants, we give them each their own separate fund number. But as Dave points out, IDOT says you can't do that. You got to have it, you got to hold it in this
Right.
fund.
Except this money, this inside baseball, but it'd be GATA.
Oh, we
The
have
GATA
to-
requirements will go with this 1.1 million, with the
Yeah.
RBI. GATA is no longer going to be required on the MFT. Finally got that thing done, except for there was,
Using,
IDOT general counsel was fighting that for some reason. I think we're okay.
I think for transparency for the board,
we can definitely show you the differences.
All right.
Yes,
so we'll have that change.
I've got a note to mark that through.
It's just kind of a one-off kind of deal,
Mhm.
the way the capital bill went down and
Right.
how to handle it. So
Dave,
once
I'll-
this is done, then it's done.
yeah, we'll get with you and we'll spread it out. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the discomfort you've seen from the committee is that we're hearing, you know, a department head has numbers on his spreadsheet, and it's different than what is being presented to the committee. And
Again, I'll go
really,
back to,
we want to try to, yeah, and I understand, but trying to
rest,
get
that's right.
everything as coherent as possible.
yeah, no problem.
Okay. All right, any other questions for Dave? All right. And we're clear on what we're doing at Capitol? Any comments from the committee on, understand what the $1 million and is plugged into Capitol, but we're at too preliminary a position to really know what is happening there. So.
Well, I understand that, but I mean, at what point in time do we make that decision of which direction we do go? How's that?
I think a lot is going to hinge on our opportunity to bond. quite honestly. So we need to get that question answered and I'll report back as soon as I know something. Then we can, start to formulate a plan of attack.
Right. So I think answer your question, it's not that I would not feel comfortable in taking out that $1 million out capital at this point in time until we know more.
And I'm not suggesting that. I guess I would be uncomfortable spending $1 million if we think there's going to be a longer term plan.
Yeah. And I think that's a fair statement. I think that's understood.
Just so we're not doing both.
Right. Right. Okay. Dave, appreciate coming in. Any other further questions or do we have anything more?
Dave's asking about solid waste, and to be
Oh.
honest, Dave, we didn't have any questions so much on that, so we can cover it if you want to. If there's anything that okay, all right.
So let me pull it up. Is it in here? On the same page? I can't remember where it was at.
It's not in his highway. It's probably in
Special funds or whatever,
department funds,
miscellaneous funds.
maybe.
Special page for it.
Is that the general fund summary? No?
The first person that finds it is gonna win. Becky will get you a prize, a chocolate or something, right?
I had it, but I don't know where it was now.
Hmm.
I had it up, but then I backed out and now I know how to get back to it.
I think I'm in the wrong
I
folder.
thought I had it and then that's not.
Well, I know what my question is.
Okay.
I believe when I looked at it, there was nothing set aside, or you got 50,000 set aside for legal fees.
Yes.
And in 2022, there's nothing. There's a zero balance. Taken,
There was, yeah, it was wrapped into the contractual services, I believe, but then I think when the budget forms came out, the legal services was broke out at that point, so I put 50,000.
well, my question is we expended some legal fees last year. And it's not.
It would be
it's
under
not
contractual
reflected.
services is where that would have come out. last year.
So. Did you find it, Wendy?
I
Yeah.
did, I'm sorry. I didn't
That's right.
want to interrupt. So if I go back one step, it is in the general folder and scan down, and we have one that's actually labeled solid waste. So I've got it up
But
here if
I
you
can
want
lay
to.
down.
9 of 11.
So we got an increase in contractual services for 23 of 14,000, 15, 16,000, whatever that is.
Mhm.
Did you expecting something there? Or?
No, that's mostly your drop off container, recycle drop off. That's sort of bulk of that comes in. That's just normal increases to that.
Okay. But in your contractual services, though, was where the expenses for the legal services were for last year? I guess I'm just wondering, and not that it matters, we don't take
No.
money out of there, but.
Here's what I have in, here's what's in contractual services, is drop off recycle. I got 123.5 plugged in there. Any expenditures we might incur for just other collections, whether it be the electronics, or whatever, which is generally free, but whatever. Yeah, they got 5,000 in there. $500, if we gotta advertise for any of our PR for our collections, and then $50,000 total plug number in there for just miscellaneous consulting fees. If there's ever a need to hire a consult for anything, probably never gonna get used, honestly. And then you've got the 50 is separate then for legal. And I have no idea if 50 is the number or not, to be honest with you.
So I guess this is back to Paul then, a question. You got the beginning cash balance of 2 million, which I think is required under ordinance, and I know we've borrowed against that, but if we're collecting 350,000, I just, I guess, what is the true balance in there? Do we know?
Give me a quick second and I can look up what the true balance is. Solid waste fund. Looks like right now, at the beginning of the year, solid waste fund was about 2.49, almost 2.5 million. So again,
And
those are estimate numbers that were plugged in.
And Paul, is that 2.4 actual cash or is that what was owed back from? the
Well, that
LLC?
would be cash, and then at that point, there was 433 owed in the interfund. Or the loan between LEC and that. And what we're reflecting there of the 143 on your screen up there is that there's a $300,000 payoff at the end of this year for that.
There's more money in the solid waste fund than what's reflected on this sheet, correct?
Correct.
And I always like to point out, you can see there's 20,000 coming out for soil and water. Okay. That's at your discretion. I put it in there because it always does, but I want you to, yeah. I want you to know that that's there. So again, that's your discretion. Well, it all is, but it's just one thing that
And the status of the scholarship.
all I did on that was I went back and I went, there's some from way back.
Right.
And I picked a sort of a date and said, this is reasonable. And then I figured out what we would owe if everybody came in tomorrow. And what did I have? $12,600. I'm not chasing anybody down.
Right.
So if it comes in, it comes in. If it doesn't, it doesn't. So,
Okay, any further questions for David? All right, thanks, David. Appreciate it.
yeah.
Yeah, you can.
The shop yard was full of water. Really only had one spot that went over the road really bad.
That's right.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. What shares I just buy.
Yeah, I'm just glad we went up over. Build roads and bridges.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the conversation go there, like the past, policy of what the future, if it ever happens.
Myself.
Let's get control here.
Yeah, well, it's Becky's problem this time. She's swapping out that.
Sure, no, I mean, he explained it to me, I don't, again, it's not like that he didn't think that he wasn't probably thinking he should have done. That's not the issue, future problems.
Yeah, we have correct.
So.
I can start. There.
I mean, I don't think that it's necessary. Okay. I was more concerned about.
Well, yeah, well, all right, I believe.
John, do you want to come up or?
Prom chair? You gotta get up there or really.
Everybody back on? Not yet.
Working now?
Everybody check their mic to make sure.
I see lots of lights. So there we go. All right. John, go
Where
ahead.
would you like to start?
Well.
Want to go down each line, or do you have specific questions? I see somebody made some colored marks on the right-hand side, so. Is that where you want me to start, on the green, blue?
Yeah, let's just start up on the top and work our way down. So,
All right, well, salary officer, that's the sheriff's salary for the new year, starting 12/1. Where obviously, I think everybody knows the statute that was passed, the law that was passed to increase the. Sheriff's
yeah, I
salary.
gotta get back in the mic.
That includes 66 and 2/3 reimbursement from the state and the county 33 and 1/3. I understand. The next line item is our full-time salary line item for all the deputies and administrative staff, the 2 secretaries. This does not include dispatch. And you can see that number went down a little bit, largely because we've hired and about to hire some more new deputies, so that salary line item is going to decrease just a little bit until they get some longevity. The next line item is salary part-time. That is largely used for the part-time bailiffs and part-time transport team deputies.
So with the new, again, everything going back to the new law, do you anticipate that 150, you've got 150 plugged in there, John, you've used 111 actual last year, or year before, 83 on, year to date for this year. Is that a number that we can play with? What are you thinking there?
As far as going less,
Yeah.
I wish I could project that. It's kind of like the gas last year we were talking about, and look what happened to that. This new no cash bail issue that's going to take place January 1st is going to be, as you probably already heard this morning, an anomaly that we're all going to have to work through probably for at least a year till we figure it all out. I was hopeful that with the new jail that was built and all the video arraignment technology that we have in there, that was going to be useful. However, I think you probably heard Judge Ackert comment that as it's written in the law now, the detainee has an opportunity to face the judge in a courtroom, not necessarily with video arraignment. So that's gonna then cause us to do a lot more transporting than we have in the past. So therefore, our part-time transport team is going to be used a little bit more. How much, I really don't know at this point in time.
Yeah, and that's the question, because so many of these offenses that we have that we're transporting now probably aren't even a detained offense, after January 1. Or is that true? Is that a true statement that some of these people we're holding now, we wouldn't be holding after January 1st?
That's very likely. Yes, very likely. But also remember, there's the 2 forms of transport. It's going to be to and from court proceedings for those that are being held, and then also to and from state facilities or other county jails that we're picking up on warrants. So we can't forget about those other forms.
Yeah, and one other thing in the discussion that we had earlier, what about the process servers? Are you going to be utilizing process servers? Guys run chasing people down more, and would that fall under that line item?
Not necessarily. We don't have anybody in a part-time position there yet. And I guess that's something that we're going to have to take a look at. Right now, we have a full-time civil process server. Secretary is trained to do that as well for those that come in to the office. And then, of course, all the deputies are trained to do that on the night shift when the civil process server isn't working. So we get it done as best we can with all the shifts, but there's only one true dedicated deputy for that service. Will that increase over time? I think it will. I think our deputies are going to have to pick it up for a while until we see how the first year goes. And then if we need to take a look at hiring a couple part-timers to help with that process serving at that point in time, that it may happen. I wish I could tell you better how this is going to work, but
I wish you could too, John. And let me tell you, I'm not holding any of you guys' feet to the fire, because there's just too many unknowns. of how this is all gonna play out.
You know, the tragic part of this is what we're seeing on the national news right now, those that are being released that haven't committed a attainable offense, and then they're going out and committing a forcible felony, unfortunately. And so I think that's really more what be my concern after January 1st than the transport side of things. But I think there is going to be some extra expenses, especially when you arrest someone that on a detainable offense on a Friday afternoon or evening, has to go before court on Saturday or maybe even a Sunday based on the time constraints. And we may have to hold court on the weekend. So then we have to bring a transport team in, transport to and from court, depending on how many we have at that point in time.
Any questions from the committee? Go ahead, Tim.
In the capital, I think that there's a request for body cams, which you are required to get.
In January 2025, yes.
And the question I had this morning was, earlier was about the video storage. And I know that's storing videos
Very expensive.
problematic and very expensive. It takes up a lot of space. Is that reflected anywhere where you're gonna have to store video? I know the state's attorney had talked about like an outside server or something, but is that something we have to look at in the budget, or is it in the budget?
No, that's just for the body cams hardware and the ability to download once the deputies pull into the parking lot, so that all the video will be downloaded. They won't actually have to take a thumb drive out of their video camera or their body cam and download it. But that's more of an IT question, Tim, for Paul Gorski. And I know we've been in discussions with him when we went to the new report management system, Motorola Flex, a couple of years ago. They've also purchased different companies over time. And so the company that we use for our video camera is directly related to Motorola. The body cams that I would recommend for the next sheriff to buy would be dedicated towards Motorola. So all these systems are integrated. Once you start piecemealing these things, they're not going to talk to each other from a technological standpoint. So I know Paul's aware of this, and from the storage, especially from the storage aspect, that might be an ongoing fee or something where we're just going to have to buy a separate server just for the storage. And but that's beyond me to really comment on as far as the expense. It's really in Paul's area.
Okay. And also in the capital, there was a for rifles.
Correct.
Are those new rifles or is replacement or what?
Replacement rifles.
okay.
Yeah. And we're trying to get rid of the shotguns and replace them with rifle rounds.
Then squad cars.
Yes.
Is not in your budget, but.
That's in the capital line item.
Right, which personally I think should be in your budget because squad cars have always been a program administered by the sheriff. It's not. Some sheriffs do it different, but I know it's you created a program of replacement. I think it should be reflected there in the sheriff's budget and allow the sheriff to do that. I know DeKalb County, we talked about that. DeKalb County years ago had I don't know if they hired a consultant, but they had a whole program on replacement of squad cars. They had a booklet that they had put out. And it just, because it's completely different than someone's personal car.
Mhm.
I mean, the squads are built differently. They have heavy duty cooling and everything else, just because of the abuse they take. So
Well, and I don't have to tell you, but I think it's important for the committee to know that from an historical standpoint, and I'll do a quick summary on the vehicles. I look back 10 years, so 2 years of Sheriff Varda's budget and then 8 years of this one. When I first walked into the office, there was Sheriff Varda was using what they call a lease lookalike program. So basically what you did is you leased your vehicles for a period of time. Your last payment you made on that lease, you paid an extra $1 and then you'd own it. Well, that program was okay, but we were paying way too high of interest rate. At the point in time, it was about 6.9%. So we found another program that was very similar to that, where we reduced the interest rate down to almost 2.5%.
But we were still making those payments. Not every month you make one payment a year on each vehicle that you would buy for 3 years and then it'd be paid off. So we tried that for a while. That money was in the sheriff's budget. And then approximately 2 years ago, I think Paula changed it over to a capital line item. And then we decided to purchase the vehicles outright. I think that's a really good idea. At the time, I was a little hesitant, not the fact that it was put in a capital line item and taken out of this budget, but from the purchasing aspect, what we were finding out is that number one, we could eliminate the interest charges. So that's a good thing from a money saving standpoint. But if we would damage a vehicle to the point where it was totaled and we were still making lease payments on it, it was, let's say, a cluster, trying to figure out how much we were going to get paid for that vehicle versus how much we still owed on it. So if you buy them and you own them, and we've had vehicles wrecked, unfortunately, since this program continued, it's much easier for us from a SERMA standpoint and getting reimbursed for the squad cars if you already own them and you can get a replacement vehicle for that amount. So it does make more sense to buy them. The other thing, I think we talked about this before from another savings standpoint is the auto repair. So all you're seeing in our maintenance line item is really your auto repair line item are tires, brakes, oil changes. Because by the time we get ready to get rid of these vehicles, they have close to 100,000 miles on them. The large part of that life of that vehicle is under warranty. So the big ticket items we're not paying for. So we've been able to maintain an auto repair a pretty static expense. And we're also using a fleet manager for our vehicles here locally to take care of them so that he can do some preventive maintenance to hopefully avoid the bigger ticket expenses. So for those reasons, I think we should stay with this program right now. We're buying 3 to 4 vehicles a year. No deputy has a vehicle longer than 3 years. Some maybe 4, depending on if we miss a vehicle or 2 a year or have to extend it out a little bit further, but they're driving much safer vehicles, more economical, certainly more economical from a gas standpoint. And really from, again, 10 years ago, we've only increased that line item at an average of 1.7% a year. So really, I think we're doing as good as we can to try to keep a good fleet in the sheriff's office.
And for the committee, if you hadn't seen that, we had asked John to provide the list of the vehicles with their mileage on there and age. So that is in your general resource folder. And John, appreciate you getting the committee that, so because it really gives us a good picture of how that program is working for us.
Sure.
And just at a real glance, you can really see that also you see that one vehicle got totaled out, what its cost was. So no, appreciate you putting that information together. I think that's valuable for the committee.
The other thing with purchasing vehicles like we are now is we're getting a better trade-in back. So that reflects on the total price of the vehicle you're actually paying. So unfortunately, we all know vehicles have gone up. When we started buying the Ford SUVs, they were right around 28.5. Now they're jumping up to about 37,000 for a new one. That's over a period of about 8 years since we started buying those. But what we also found out when we were trading in vehicles 8 years ago, we were getting between 2,000 and 2,500 for the trade-ins. Now we're averaging 6,500 to 7,000. So that's taken off that total price. So in essence, you're almost paying the same amount for the vehicle minus 1,500 to 2,000 more 8 years later because of the increase of the trade-in value that we're getting for the vehicles that we're trading. And that's from the dealership. They'll tell us that as well. If you trade one in that's got over 100,000, you're not going to get as much money for it. So we're trying to get them in just under 100 if we can.
Now, is that total vehicle that was covered under our insurance?
Not totally, unfortunately, but we got 32.5 back. I think Paul probably has that number somewhere, but I think it's close to that. It's going to cost us more to replace it at some point in time, but we can't even order them until the end of this month, 1st of September. So we probably won't see that vehicle for a couple of months anyway. So total vehicle outfit right now, if they're 37,000, again, minus whatever the trade-in might be, Then we have to outfit them, and generally that cost is right around $3,500, and that includes the uninstall, the install of the equipment, and also the striping of the vehicle. Now, that price has also been pretty consistent, absent us buying new equipment for the vehicle. So almost every vehicle, I would say 90% of them right now have new video cameras, new being within the last couple of years, new radars. And we're starting to we have a program for the next 3 years. And I'm going to share with the new sheriff. We've already started it, thanks to ARPA as well. We're replacing all the portable radios and the mobile radios inside the squad cars. So they're all aging and it's time to trade them or get rid of them, get new ones. But we're doing that over a period of 3 years. So that install price will stay at about $3,500 because we're not buying new equipment to put into these vehicles. The only time that'll start going up is when the vehicles start changing the model. And unfortunately, that changes the push bumpers, the interior dividers, and certainly the console where the radios are put. So it changes everything once the vehicles get longer, wider, whatever they change in the model. Hopefully that won't happen for a while, but that's why we've stuck with the Ford SUVs. There are other police SUVs out there, but once we change the model or the style of the vehicle, that changes a lot of equipment that's put inside the vehicle, which equates to more expense. Sorry, I went on so long about that, but I think you need to know a little bit more. The vehicles are not just buying a vehicle and being done with it. There's a lot more to it.
Well, we jump from back and forth from your budget over to capital. So just as a reminder, so that those body cams, that's going to be the request for fiscal year 24. Is you're not planning on moving that up to this fiscal year anticipated?
No, I just wanted you to be aware of that. I really want the next sheriff to make that decision since he does have some freedom to do that right now. I know, Dixon PD is looking at the same type of system. So your numbers will probably be a little bit better, especially if we can do a cooperative purchase with the same company like we did with several other items over the last few years. So that may be something that you'll want to take a look at and buy them a little bit sooner. But nonetheless, that's something I think the sheriff needs to discuss with you. Sure.
All right, back to your line we were at.
Oh, Rick's got a question. I can see it in his eye.
I do.
Okay, go ahead, Rick.
Your inmate medical was increased.
Yes.
From 95,000 budget last year to 112. I mean, is this a contract or is it based on incidences or how do you pay your inmate medical?
Yeah, it's through Advanced Correctional Healthcare. And each year they increase their contract by the medical CPI, which is usually higher than our normal CPI. This year it's 3.5%. So then on top of that is an increase in the nurse's hours from 25 hours a week to 32 hours a week. So she's still part-time, but we're using her a lot more and we're paying overtime to bring her in. So I'd rather just pay it up front straight.
So I guess the question is with this new law, are we looking at a decrease in population? Is there a situation where is this like an insurance policy we're paying now, just so much a month based on, doesn't matter how many, if we got, full jail or one person there or?
No, it's based on our average daily population is how the contract is formatted. So if we go over the average daily population that we signed the contract for, which is 44, then we're going to pay a little bit more. We go under, we actually get a quarterly reimbursement check from them if we're under that average daily population.
Okay, so do you foresee then with this new law kicking in, what's our population going to be? Same, down, up?
I would just make a guess. It probably is going to go down because there's very few, if any, drug offenses that are detainable anymore. There's a fair amount of our folks.
And I guess that's why I was asking, because with that being said, I mean, would we be good to hold it at 95,000?
Well, we can't. That's a 3.5% of that is a contractual increase that I have no control over.
as far as the nurses' hours, that's what we've been wanting to increase for several years because we're paying her overtime to come in on the weekends anyway. So it's logical that we pay her upfront straight time. So
And I
That's-
understand the increase, but what you're telling me is if our numbers go down, we would still get that rebatable money, I'll call it, back at some point in time, which would be accredited against the actual expense.
yes, and you'll see at the end of the year, next year, I doubt, if this holds true and the inmate population does go down a little bit, we won't be paying out 112,790. We'll have reimbursement checks coming in and they come right back with it. Like that.
And then your maintenance agreement right below that, what's that line item? Because that's increased about 25,000.
Yeah, and I wish we could change that heading because it is confusing for everybody, but it was always maintenance agreement. So what I've made that line item to reflect is all our contractual obligations. In other words, a lot of our Lexipol comes out of there, which is our policy management system. All our connectivity fees for the tablets, all the help me out, Dave, for other maintenance items that are coming in. Accurate controls for the jail as a maintenance agreement, it's more of a service agreement, but nonetheless, that comes out of there. That's about 15,000 a year.
Okay, so let's talk
We've
about that real
got
quick.
several lines.
So you currently have a maintenance agreement for what on active control? Is that, and the reason I'm asking is Tom Wilson through the properties wants to get a maintenance agreement for all our air conditioners and handlers. Do you guys currently have a maintenance agreement with them up?
Not for that type of
Okay.
thing. Accurate controls is the technology in the jail. So all the control room stuff, cameras, computers, card readers.
So currently though, in 2022, you've got a credit in this line item of 14,000. Apparently went back, or I'm not quite sure why there's a credit. But so basically that's a difference of where we're currently at to what we're forecasting of about $90,000 swing. Is there something that's a large increase?
$14,000 credit.
Where you at, Rick?
In the actual budget page, it's up there in the screen, if you can, under the maintenance agreement line item. There was 14,000, almost 15,000 credited in 2022 so far. Had budgeted 47.5, but we're forecasting 70,000.
Oh, we put a couple checks in. Can you pull that one up and see what we put into maintenance, please? Because I know there's a couple I gave you here recently on the medical assisted recovery program, and just want to make sure we're putting the checks in the right places.
How much are you spending a month?
We're up to 12.8.
Yeah.
12.5, but let's say it's an average.
We must have budgeted about. No, I'm looking at last year, you were about 9, 8, about 7,500. I think.
That's what we used to spend.
Right.
Looks like there was a state of Illinois maintenance agreement reimbursement check for 48 grand, 410 that went in there. That's the credit. That's why there's a credit there.
That was that was the lawsuit that was settled on the DOC transport. And I didn't know it went into the maintenance line.
Yeah, must have been,
I was supposed to go into food.
that's where, they would have asked somebody in the office where they wanted that. So that's where they put it. But beyond that, I mean, you're probably averaging, I don't know, 4,000 or 5,000 at least a month in cost in that. Outside of that credit that's in there.
About 60,000 a year. That's why, you know, if you had an increase in something coming up, because it's just a large jump.
The biggest increase was that Accurate Controls just came up this year for the extra 15,000. And that's gonna be annual. And some of these come up at different times, so what Paul's reflecting at the half year mark, we're gonna probably have some more coming up in the fall.
I guess just one last quick question on the food line item, in precinct 5.
Yeah, they kind of hit us with a surprise last year, and of course, after budget hearings, and they come up in January and increase their food costs.
Is that
Which-
based on inmate or is that monthly cost?
No, that's just their food, just the food itself. And what they're buying and what they're having to sell it to us for. And that, we got hit with that in January. We asked them again, is that going up? And they said, well, yeah, obviously with what's happening nationwide. So I put another $5,000 cushion in there just in case. But with less inmates,
They don't feed as many.
hopefully won't have to feed as many. Problem with this contract with the food service, it's not a problem, but it's, I think all contracts are working this way. Again, average daily population, we got a certain number that we, cost per meal per day per inmate. And if you go over that, actually the cost goes down a little bit, but you're serving more inmates. If you go below it, the cost goes up. Sure, less inmates, so it's gonna equate over
I gotta
time.
cover the first one, so. That's fine.
But John, based on this new law, isn't that something that we might be able to look at another year? Possibly go back to local meals or something.
Is there a kitchen in the?
Oh, yeah,
So
It's full. Yeah. full
let's start using it, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, if we get down to where there's a handful of people out there. We're doing something different than meals.
Well, at that point in time too, I'd probably renegotiate the contract and see where we can get. The one thing that happened this year, Ogle County, for whatever reason, lost their food service or are renegotiating with another food service. So for the last couple of months, we've been supplying food or sharing, I would say, the same food service with Ogle County. They come down and get their meals. They pay for their meals, we pay for ours. But it might be something to look at next year, the year after, consolidate these food services with the Ogle County Jail as well. And maybe we can get a better bang for our buck. They're serving more inmates, lesser cost, and we can both benefit. So that's certainly another conversation to have with the Ogle County Sheriff at the time, which may save us money in the long run.
We've been bopping around. I want to focus in on, we talked about salary part-time. Let's talk about overtime. You have $200,000 you plugged into the salary overtime. You're tracking 170,000 overtime this fiscal year, and we're probably going to have to circle back after we get done, John, and maybe not that, probably going to need to start thinking about what type of budget adjustment we're going to be doing for your department to wrap up this year. But just looking at that salary overtime, what's your thoughts there?
Well, what happened this year is unfortunate again, but we had 2 lateral transfers hired in December. And one was going to be for a retiree in June. And the other one was going to be the new hire that you allotted for last year's staffing discussion. And neither of them worked out, unfortunately. Shortly after that, in January, we were notified that one of our deputies who's in the National Guard had orders to deploy for a year overseas. So we're down 3 deputies in a matter of a month and a half in the brand new fiscal year. We lost our retiree and we also lost another one to another department. So we've been truly down 5 for 6-7 months. And so therefore, unfortunately, the overtime is going to go up and they were all in patrol division. We've had a couple other long-term illnesses
and/or injuries in the corrections division, which caused a little bit of overtime, not near as bad as patrol. But, we've been faced with these staffing shortages, unfortunately, largely out of our control for several years. The one good thing that happened is we were able to, Dave was able to do this in May. We were able to get 2 new hires into an early class. We were not scheduled to get anybody in until August of this year. Those 2 that went in May are actually graduating this Thursday, and they're going to be in the FTO program as soon as they return. We're going to be out on our own in 10 weeks or less, which is good news. So we have some light at the end of the tunnel with those 2. We just in the process of hiring 2 more corrections deputies, 2 replacements. And and then just waiting for our deputy to return from the National Guard, hopefully in December. And so we should be back up to where we need to be in staffing, but it won't be very close to the beginning of next fiscal year, unfortunately. So that's kind of where we're at. Unfortunately, the hiring process and in our line of work takes a little while. We have to do good backgrounds through the assessment process and interviews and things like that, and then trying to get them into an academy. Again, things are working themselves out there from an academy standpoint, where we're going to have access right down the road to Sauk Valley's Academy next year. So
we were talking last night, the dearth of candidates for all the departments in the bigger municipalities, numbers, retired people are taking early outs. Is this affecting our ability to find people that want to come work for the county, or what's been your guys' impression?
well, I could say we're not abnormal. Our applicant pool over the last 2 to 3 years has declined by at least 60 to 70%. We used to get 20 to 25 applicants in at any one time, and now we're lucky to get that.
Dave, Becky's going to kick me right in the rear because you're not mic'd. She was gritting her. I could feel her gritting her teeth over here.
And I don't talk that loud, so. To reflect on the overtime situation again, I know from the last time we were here telling you if we can become full staff, the overtime becomes much easier. But just to look at, the 2 line items from our overtime line item is obviously going over, but if you look at our payroll line item, it's well under. And that's suggesting that we just don't have the people in and we're not paying. Because even from, again, like the sheriff was explaining, the 2 lateral transfers that we tried to bring in, they did not work out to where then we weren't paying anybody until we could get somebody in. And the same thing from our corrections division. We've actually brought in a candidate. She was in for a while, and then I'll say we agreed to part ways. We've just been struggling, nothing else, to replace people based on our candidate.
So I guess that leads me to the next question. You go down to the next line item on holiday pay. So we're already at 133, 334 in holiday pay in actual year-to-date number. You've got in the budget 132. So Okay, okay, all right, that's not, yeah, okay, okay. That was, that's right, I forgot about that was a one-time disbursement. Yeah, thank you.
Other than just to remind you from our probationary employees, we've implemented what you asked us to do on probationary employees are paid out by holiday for the first year.
Okay, then on sick pay. You plugged in 52,000, we're at 47,496. This year, we're actually zero, we had zero budget. From last year. Want to talk about that?
Jim, I can maybe enlighten a little bit on what that is.
Okay,
So for those that earn sick time during the year and have more than 60 days banked, there is a partial payout of that at the beginning of December every year. That's that, you get paid for how many over the 60 days that you already have banked. You could bank, or you can get 12 in a year, right? So
13.
half of that you could get paid out. The other half goes to an IMRF bank. And then also for those deputies in this case that are close to retirement, they start pulling their sick bank value as an extra pay during each pay period. And that's also reflected in that. So what we've done, that used to roll up into, I'll call it the county board general value, just an extra cost in the, at a county board, or not county board, but county level. But we're trying to show a true cost of every department. So that's what that is. Go ahead.
County cash or accrual system.
We're on a cash basis.
all right, is there anything else that you want to hit on, John? And then I'll flip it over and ask the committee if they have any further questions.
I think we've talked about most of your highlighted numbers or increases that we're requesting. I think there's anything else in here. Any questions?
Yeah, Tom.
Questions, the commissary fund, I know it's a fair amount in there, what is that? How's that used?
So the commissary fund in general can be used for anything that benefits the inmate.
Okay.
So that's basically,
That's their money.
most of it is generated by them, yes. So it's either money from a commissary fund is that general term that's used for several line items that are under the inmate fund, I'll call it. Commissary is one of those line items, but we all refer to it as commissary. So commissary is when they want to buy a candy, gum, popcorn, whatever, pop. But we also generate money in that inmate fund through their phone call system, through Securus. And so anytime they make a phone call or use a tablet to, communicate with their family or whatever, we generate a certain amount of commission from that goes into that fund as well. So that's where we can use some of those funds in there as long as it is to the benefit of the inmate.
Second question, I realize, I know firsthand, National Guard says you're going somewhere going. But when you volunteer, do we have a right to say no to volunteering to go?
For extra training, we can, based on staffing issues, and we have communicated with some commanders at different times when we had a few deputies doing some extra volunteering, I'll say.
I mean, right now it's a hardship.
It absolutely
For
is.
us, and I understand that's voluntarily.
Yeah, absolutely. And I support the military 110%. But when it comes to, where we're at right now, we're extremely bad at 5 short.
Yeah.
But with a year deployment, that was not something that we could barter
But early on, that one was volunteer to go with.
As far as-
My understanding was that a particular individual volunteered for that assignment.
That's my knowledge.
Okay, that's what I was told by the
Yeah.
family. I just, doesn't matter the individual, I'm just curious about the situation if we had.
Yeah.
I know my employer once told my regard, I wasn't explaining to him. I understand.
Yeah, that gets a little touchy, some of those conversations.
Any other questions on the sheriff's budget? Doug?
This is going back to the automobiles. John. Are those purchased locally at the Ford dealer or we go on the state contract or where? How are you? purchasing?
Shimmer Ford and LaSalle Peru, we've been working with for the last several years. And part of the reason for that is they can award us the state bid price
Okay,
and they deliver for free. And they've been working with us very
Okay.
nicely. We've tried here a few times and it hasn't worked out.
okay, I don't know, went out there. I was just interested, trying to keep the money in the
I'd like to
county.
keep it local, but
Yeah.
it doesn't seem like they want to
Try to
work with
balance
us.
new ownership.
Have not yet. And I've heard that there might be a new owner there, but I don't know.
There is a new one.
Is there? Okay.
I mean, that's,
It would be worth a try then.
okay.
And we
that's
have
fine.
bought some locally when we had other than Ford vehicles here in town.
I just think about trying to keep all of our money local.
Yep, I agree.
Okay, thank you.
So
Any other questions?
you should have a big smile on your face, Mr. Kitson.
Pardon?
You should have a big smile on your face right now.
What's up?
This is the last time you're gonna have to sit in front of me at a budget hearing.
It wasn't I. They wore me down last night, John. So
So having said that, and this is not a non-budget question, but with you coming back, basically staying on, Dave, now, did Clay stay in place? And is Clay coming over and doing any stuff for us now or
That-
what's?
That was
I-
gonna be, yeah.
As I had understood how that was all gonna flow, I thought, man, that's gonna work out great because that gives, the anticipated incoming sheriff an opportunity to really work in the office and learn the job and all that. So,
love you, buddy.
With
yeah,
the-
yeah.
with that
no,
being
we're
said-
glad to see you, but so I guess what's all happening with Clay?
Well, that was going to be a discussion at committee next week, but yes, you're right. We had to wait until any other candidate could officially be slated. But my intent was to bring Clay over as soon as we could to start getting him transitioned into his new job, which I think is going to be very beneficial for him. It would have been for me, it probably would have been for you. You had a couple months to work there. So we're looking at September 19th to bring him in. I'll appoint him as a chief deputy. But his role really will be just to learn everything he can about the department in about 2 months period of time. Dave is going to take on a new role as a lieutenant in the Detective Bureau. We currently have no supervision there since Shane Miller retired in June. And Dave brings in well over 20 years of experience in investigations with two young new detectives, which I think is going to be awesome for them. They've already started several cases, unfortunately, last week together. And then should Clay agree, we've got another person that is already working in the chief deputy position once Clay takes over as sheriff. So we're hoping to move all the pieces together by December 1st, and there'll be a very smooth transition in these new positions. So yes, correct.
Well, I'm glad to hear that at least that part of it is still is going to happen. So that's great. So, all right, I guess there's no further questions from the committee. You guys are off the hot seat. Thank you so much for what you guys do. Appreciate you coming in and working with us and all right. Well, I'm hoping to get done so we don't have to do that, John. All right, so we've done. Okay. we've gotten through to C. We have treasurer's office, financial officer approval. Wendy, do you want to take? We can have that. What am I looking at? Am I looking at the wrong thing?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm with you now. So this was, we circled back, added to your agenda, circled back after the conversation we had with the treasurer's office about the financial officer position. At the time, you could not take any vote on it because it was not on your
Oh.
agenda. I'm not sure if you're ready to take a vote on it today, but in case you wanted to, we wanted it on the agenda. So that's why it's there.
Yeah, that's right. That was the reminder. So that, what that was, it was just to have some transparency so that we knew, so Paul could in confidence, start working towards filling that position for the upcoming fiscal year. So, that's all that was. So.
And again, Becky just placed it on the agenda in case you wanted to take action. You're not required to, just there as a placeholder.
So I guess it's the pleasure of the committee. I guess my thing was, I thought that would give some clarity and also some transparency that there is support from the committee. So when that comes before the full county board, so entertain a motion for that unless there's, you guys want to do it a different way.
But I'd sure like to see where we're at with the budget. It's a pretty good deficit.
Do we have an
We're at 300,000 right now.
That's what I was gonna say. Do we have an update after the changes that we talked about today or where we're at?
Far as I know, we're still at the 300,000. So you know, we're at about a 1 point, and Paul and Dave are, Paul, you want to talk about where we are as far as ahead of revenues for this fiscal year?
Yeah.
About where we're at.
Yeah, so for revenues, I think I showed Jim some information last night. I didn't get a chance to show everybody, but revenues in, I'm gonna pull this up real quick. So, sales tax, our budget is 2 million. We're already at 1.6. And at this time a year ago, we were at 1.3. So we're way ahead there. Income tax, our budget was 2.2 for the year. We're at 2.7. And last year we were at 1.7. Fines and fees, we are down, but we've got a moratorium on our expansion of solar and different things like wind farms. But we're at 1.3 there and we had 2.2 budgeted. So we're still, somewhat on track. And, overall, we are way ahead on revenue. And even when I look at expenses, everybody is holding to budget for the most part. They're doing a really nice job. So right now we have a surplus.
With the exception of public safety.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. But they should have 31% of their budget left. They're at 19% left, meaning, yeah, they're ahead of where they should. They've spent a little more than they should at this time. Yes.
Right.
But even with all of that said, we're about 1.3 surplus right now to our budget. And last year at this time, we were 200,000 surplus at this time. And we ended up at a $2.6 million surplus. So from a revenue standpoint, if everybody continues to hold the line on their spending, we will end this year in a favorable position. So.
Now, having said that, that doesn't mean, as you guys all know, when you're contemplating, ongoing expenses when your result does not. It's not what you should be making decisions on, so.
So the next scheduled meeting for this committee outside of your regular finance committee meeting is Tuesday, August 30th. What I might propose is that, as Rick points out, we did have a number of things that we want to follow and circle back to and make some adjustments, some of those health insurance line items and et cetera. Maybe we push this topic forward to that August 30th meeting date with some finalized or more finalized numbers to the budget based on the adjustments we've made today and over the last couple of meetings that we've had. And then perhaps you all would have a comfort level of committing to this, committing to allowing Paul to move forward in advance of December 30th, or excuse me, December 1st.
And I guess if we're gonna do that, do we do the same thing for E, the replacement administrator position?
That is correct.
So,
That's what I would suggest, because we do have some things hanging out there. We don't have numbers for you right now on the fly adjusted for today, for sure.
so is committee comfortable with that? So D and E will defer and we'll have that on the next budget hearing agenda. And we will have some adjustments made for the full budget for you guys to consider. So Rick,
Is there, I'm just asking, is there a reason why we're waiting until the 30th? I guess in my mind, I'd like to keep the ball rolling while it's fresh and with the stuff we've talked about. I'm getting a little older and harder to remember things, but
So selfishly, I think that was more for staff than for you guys, because next week we move into committee week. And we anticipated that there would be some changes to the budget based on these hearings. And so I think we just wanted a little window of time. So right now, what we've done is this is the budget we laid out at the beginning of the year. This is the budget that was published. If you want to add another date, you're certainly welcome to do that. We will have to then go out to the newspaper and do the normal process of notifying the public that we're scheduling another date. And that's certainly possible. I think between now and the 30th, though, it's going to be tough to find a time that certainly staff can be there because of committee meetings next week. Does anybody else have a preference?
I guess with that being said, I mean, wait till the 30th. The only other date that I was looking at was possibly a week earlier, the 23rd. I don't know if that does anything differently or not, but
I think my point to that would be is it going to make such a significant difference that it's worth going out and publishing in the newspaper and the additional cost of that? This calendar was also, like I said, developed back in December so that we could publish it in advance and not have to have these individual costs. But it was also based on what you guys kind of did last year, you know, where you had gaps of time for staff to regroup and put things back together. We kind of built in those same things we'd done last year. So that's why this was picked as the magic date. Other than that, there wasn't any real key reason. Because again, remember, we did this back in December. So everybody's calendar was wide open then.
in light of the fact that we have to publish, if that's what we have to do, then I guess we'll just stay at the same schedule. If we didn't have to publish, I guess I'd be pushing more for an earlier meeting, but. Pardon me. Speaking to your microphone.
So Becky says you can go out to YouTube and refresh your memory next week by watching all of these on YouTube.
riveting, right before you go to bed. All right, so we're next meeting date is the 30th, unless the committee wants to make a change.
And so our goal for that will be to do the wrap up. You'll get the final numbers based on the changes we've talked about and the review we've talked about with health insurance. It is possible we'll present to you some tentative levy numbers with regard to the tax levy. If there's anything else that you would hope to accomplish between now, knowing what you know now, and the 30th, especially if you want any action, please let us know so we can make sure and get it on the agenda. I'm anticipating that this will be the final budget wrap up. We do have another tentative date the following week on Tuesday. set aside if, just in case. But as of right now, I think we probably can wrap up with one more meeting.
Well, I guess that's what I was gonna just ask. I mean, is there anything that we see glaring that we need to change? So that when we, if we get to this next meeting and then we suggest the change and then we have another meeting and
Well, I think, I guess what's in my mind is I'm probably going to be sitting with Paul and Wendy and Paula and because we've got $300,000 deficit that we're going to have to rectify unless we want to pass a budget deficit. And I
Well,
don't
here-
think anybody wants to do that.
here's what I'm gonna throw out.
Sure.
In for your discussion, and maybe we openly discuss it right now. I think we got 500 and some thousand we're transferring back into the health department. And that gets them up to like 800,000 or 900,000 for a fund balance. Again, the discussion was, and I don't know what the number needs to be, but do they need to maintain that large of a balance? I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, if there's something that happens, the county's gonna have to be at the forefront of it.
Mhm.
So it'd be
And
my suggestion that we
that's a
look
fair
at,
suggestion. So.
I would look at that first. Other than that, then you start talking about cutting into salaries and overtime and benefits and line items of things that we really probably don't have the detail to be able to nitpick on. So
And the other option is, you look at both sides. And you've heard, when we started the process, we talked about the assumptions that Paula made. And there's probably some top end numbers that we can play with as well to help ease the pain a
maybe the
little bit.
compromise is somewhere in between the increase in revenue, decrease in expenses.
Correct. And I think and that would be my goal, when I get together with Paul and Paula and Wendy is we could possibly bring some options to you guys as a starting point for discussion of how to close that gap. And that way we're not just at the next meeting, at the wrap up meeting, we're not wasting, half hour, 45 minutes of your guys' time, trying to come up with something. We'll try to have some options for you guys laid out. Okay.
So it's certainly not going to close the budget gap, but this reminded me of a little bit of follow-up that I owed you on the conversation with regard to Jesse and his answering service. I did reach out. I reached out to Jesse by email. I've not yet heard back from him, but I also reached out to Shelley from 911 or ETSB, and she said they don't really know why they're not currently doing that. In other words, they'd be very willing to do that. So that's one of the things I need a little time to follow up on and get that worked out. And then again, if we find that Jesse's agreeable to that, then we make that modification in the budget too. So I've got a couple things like that you've asked me to follow up on that I can hopefully have completed by this next meeting also.
So,
I think it's safe to say that those of us that have sat here for a number of years in finance, it's a little scary to hear Paul's numbers. That we have money and we can do things where, we have lived on one-time money for several years in the past. So it's a little difficult to just say, hey, that's great, let's do that, without getting our heads wrapped around it all. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's a very fair statement. And as also, I think there's some reticence, Paul is trying to be very, very conservative. We're dealing with an unknown situation on the national economy, going forward. What is the inflation numbers going to actually be? What does it mean by what this recession that we're talking about? What is the Fed going to do with discount rate? There's all these questions we don't know the answer to. And it's our job to kind of find that middle path of safety. So, no, understand, appreciate that, Tom.
Well, and I guess to follow up with what you're saying, Jim, Wendy, you mentioned earlier that, bond company is going to be looking for a revenue source to be able to pay for if we go for a bond. And so I think that's why it's important not to pass a deficit budget, show an excess every year if we can, legitimately. And my thought pattern is in 7-10 years, whenever this public safety tax is retired, at least the first bond, that portion goes back to cover salaries and stuff for the sheriff and deputies and things like that. And so you'll have that money relief, I guess I'll call it, in the general fund to be able to, so we just got to be able to show a path to get to that point in time.
Right, I agree. Yep. So does Paul. Paul's back there nodding his head.
Same thought, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, anything else good for the cause? If not, ARPA people, we'll see you Thursday. Oh, motion to adjourn by Kitson, seconded by Forrester. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed. Thanks.